Introduction. This book is not an instruction manual. It is a wake-up call. You are living through a moment that future generations will study, not because of a single invention, but because of a silent shift in how work, intelligence, and relevance are decided. Jobs are disappearing quietly. Professions are thinning without announcements. Effort is increasing while security is shrinking. And beneath it all, artificial intelligence is not behaving like a tool. It is behaving like a force that rearranges the rules themselves. This book does not ask whether AI will change your life. It starts from the assumption that it already is. What follows is not comfort, nor hype, nor technical jargon. It is a clear-eyed exploration of what is unfolding, why familiar assurances no longer hold, and what it will mean for human professionals in the short and long run. You will hear uncomfortable truths, connect patterns that rarely get discussed together, and confront questions most people avoid until it is too late. If you continue listening, you won't just understand AI better, you will understand why learning it may be the most important decision of your professional life. Chapter 1: The Silence Before the Storm. The most dangerous phase of any disaster. Every major collapse in history shared one thing in common. Silence. Not the silence of peace, but the silence of denial. Before the Roman Empire fell, markets still bustled. Before the financial crash of 2008, offices were full. Before the dot-com bubble burst, everyone believed the internet had rewritten economics. And today, before the greatest workforce disruption in human history, most people are still going to work every morning, replying to emails, attending meetings, and planning their careers as if tomorrow will look like yesterday. That assumption is the most dangerous one you can make in the AI era. Because revolutions do not announce themselves with sirens. They arrive quietly, disguised as efficiency. The language of layoffs has changed. In the past, job losses came with panic words. Recession. Crisis. Bankruptcy. Collapse. Today, job losses arrive wrapped in polished corporate language. Workforce optimization. Strategic realignment. Operational efficiency. Cost rationalization. When Amazon lays off tens of thousands, the press release doesn't say people are no longer needed. It says we are investing in long-term efficiency. When Salesforce cuts teams, the message isn't roles are redundant. It's we are rebalancing resources. When TCS freezes hiring or quietly reduces bench strength, it isn't framed as fear. It's framed as future readiness. But beneath all this polished language lies one uncomfortable truth. The work still needs to be done. The people don't. A brutal data point that should have shaken the world. In a moment that should have triggered global alarm bells, Google publicly stated that over 25% of its internal code is now written by AI. Pause. Let that sink in. Google is not a struggling startup. It is one of the most advanced technology organizations on the planet, employing some of the world's best engineers. Yet 1 out of every 4 lines of code, once written by humans, is now written by machines. And this number is not static. It is accelerating. This single statistic quietly destroys 3 long-held beliefs. 1. Coding is a safe profession. 2. Creative logic cannot be automated. 3. AI will only assist, not replace. None of these assumptions survive reality anymore. The illusion of more jobs will be created. Whenever fear rises, philosophy arrives. This has always been the pattern. When people begin to sense that something fundamental is breaking, comforting ideas rush in to restore balance. In the age of AI, the most repeated comfort sentence is this. AI will eliminate some jobs, but it will create many more. At first glance, this sounds rational. Even optimistic. It echoes history. After all, the Industrial Revolution created factory jobs. Computers created IT jobs. The Internet created digital careers. So why worry? Because this statement, while not entirely false, is dangerously incomplete. And in times of disruption, incomplete truths are more harmful than outright lies. Job creation is not the same as job replacement. Yes, AI will create jobs. But here is the part almost no one emphasizes enough. AI will not create jobs at the same scale, speed, or accessibility as the jobs it destroys. This difference changes everything. Earlier technological shifts replaced manual effort but expanded human coordination. AI replaces both execution and coordination. When factories replaced artisans, factories still needed thousands of workers. When computers replaced typists, offices still needed large teams to operate software. But AI does not follow this pattern. AI compresses labor. The mathematics that nobody wants to talk about. Let's remove emotion and look at pure math. If one AI system can write code equivalent to 50 developers, one AI model can generate content equivalent to 100 writers. One AI-driven analytics engine can replace dozens of analysts. Then the equation is simple. You do not need 100 new jobs to replace 100 lost jobs. You need one overseer. This is called fractional oversight. One human. Many machines. This is not theoretical. This is already operational reality. Why new AI jobs don't save the majority? People often respond with, but AI engineers, prompt engineers, AI ethicists, AI managers, these roles are growing. Yes. They are. But let's ask the uncomfortable question. For whom? These new roles require advanced skills, demand constant upskilling, are far fewer in number, are concentrated in limited geographies. For every 100 roles automated, maybe 5 to 10 new roles appear. And those roles are not accessible to the same people. A call center employee cannot instantly become an AI architect. A junior content writer cannot overnight become a machine learning specialist. Job creation without accessibility is not job security. It is job polarization. The speed mismatch, humans versus machines. There is another factor rarely discussed, time. AI destroys jobs faster than humans can reskill. Training an AI model takes weeks or months. Reskilling a human being takes years. And the gap keeps widening. By the time someone finishes learning a new skill, the AI tools have evolved. The expectations have shifted. The baseline has moved again. This creates a perpetual lag where humans are always catching up, and never arriving. From teams to individuals to systems. Earlier workplaces were built around teams. AI-first workplaces are built around systems. In a team-based world, losing one worker slowed output. Hiring more people increased capacity. In an AI-driven world, losing people barely impacts output. Improving systems multiplies capacity. This flips traditional employment logic. The question is no longer, how many people do we need? It becomes, how few people can manage this system? Why oversight roles will shrink too? Even the idea of human oversight is temporary. Today, one person supervises many AI systems. Tomorrow, that same supervision will itself be automated. AI already monitors performance, flags anomalies, self-corrects outputs, optimizes workflows. Human oversight is becoming lighter, not deeper. Which means even oversight roles will eventually thin out. The hard truth hidden behind optimism. The comforting narrative says, don't worry, new jobs will come. The harder truth is, the economy will need fewer humans to produce more value. This is unprecedented. For the first time in history, productivity is rising. Output is increasing. But human participation is shrinking. That is not a normal cycle. That is a structural break. Why this changes the meaning of career safety. In this new reality, job safety does not come from titles, or degrees, or years of experience. It comes from adaptability. Those who learn to work with AI will multiply their value. Those who don't will be competing against machines that never stop improving. This is why the sentence, "AI won't take your job, but someone using AI will," is true, and yet incomplete. Because even that someone will eventually be fewer in number. The real question this forces you to ask. The real question is no longer, will AI create jobs? The real question is, will I be among the shrinking number of humans still needed? And that question has only one meaningful response. You cannot stop the machines. You cannot slow the math. But you can choose to understand the tools reshaping your future. That is why learning AI is not about curiosity anymore. It is about remaining relevant in a world that needs fewer people to do more work than ever before. The rise of the one-person department. Once upon a time, a website required developers, designers, testers. Content required writers, editors, proofreaders. Sales required teams, analysts, coordinators. Today, one person with the right AI tools can generate production-ready code, design brand-consistent visuals, write blogs, ads, emails, scripts, analyze data, forecast trends, optimize campaigns. What once took weeks now takes hours. What once took teams now takes prompts. And once the AI system is trained, fine-tuned, and integrated, the marginal cost of output drops close to zero. This is the economic earthquake most people are missing. Why this disruption is fundamentally different. Every past technological shift followed one rule. Humans were still needed to operate the machines. Steam engines needed operators. Computers needed users. The internet needed contributors. AI breaks this rule. Modern AI systems decide, create, optimize, improve themselves, with minimal human intervention. This is not automation. This is delegation of cognition. And that distinction changes everything. When tools become specialists. Earlier tools were generic. AI is becoming purpose-built. Coding-only models. Design-only systems. Sales automation agents. Customer support replacements. Recently, Microsoft launched AI systems capable of automating large parts of call center operations end-to-end. Think about what that means. Call centers employ millions globally. They are not niche roles. They are economic lifelines in many countries. Now imagine one AI system, trained on company data, handling thousands of conversations simultaneously. Never tired. Never emotional. Never sick. The business logic is brutal. And businesses will always choose survival over sentiment. The emotional blind spot in the AI conversation. Most AI discussions focus on technology. Very few talk about human pressure. Today, inflation is at historic highs. Healthcare costs are rising. Mental health crises are increasing. Family expectations are intensifying. People are already stretched thin. Now add job insecurity, skill obsolescence, career uncertainty. This combination has no historical parallel. This is not just a technological shift. It is a psychological shockwave. Why the fear feels heavier this time? In earlier disruptions, people could see the path forward. Learn computers. Learn the internet. Learn digital tools. Now. The path itself keeps changing. AI tools update weekly. Capabilities double in months. Entire workflows disappear overnight. This creates a constant low-grade anxiety. What I learn today, will it still matter tomorrow? That fear paralyzes many. And paralysis is exactly how people get left behind. The storm is not coming. It has already arrived. The most dangerous misunderstanding is believing that the AI storm is ahead of us. It isn't. We are inside it. The layoffs you read about are not reactions. They are adjustments. The hiring freezes are not pauses. They are tests. The automation pilots are not experiments. They are prototypes of the future. Why this book exists. This book is not here to scare you. It is here to wake you up. Because the worst place to be in any transformation is unaware, unprepared, and overconfident. In the chapters ahead, we will study history, decode patterns, examine what's coming next, and confront uncomfortable truths. Not to glorify AI, not to demonize it, but to answer one urgent question. In a world where intelligence is no longer scarce, what happens to humans who choose not to adapt? This silence you feel right now, it won't last long. The storm is already moving. End of Chapter 1. Special note by the author. What makes me eligible to write this book? This chapter is not about authority by title. It is about authority by trajectory. I am not writing this book because AI is fashionable. I am writing it because I have spent most of my adult life watching systems change, collapse, and rebuild, often long before the majority realized what was happening. My relationship with disruption did not begin with artificial intelligence. It began with a choice. Walking away from certainty. Early in my career, I resigned from a government job, a decision many considered irrational, even reckless. Stability was guaranteed. Prestige was attached. The path ahead was predictable. But predictability was precisely the problem. I could sense that the world was moving in directions our institutions were not prepared to acknowledge. Systems that rewarded compliance over curiosity felt increasingly fragile. I did not leave because I had a perfect plan. I left because I understood something fundamental. Security built on outdated assumptions is an illusion. That decision forced me into research, not academic research alone, but real-world observation. Since 2008, I have been continuously studying how businesses evolve, how technologies disrupt norms, and how individuals either adapt or disappear quietly from relevance. 2 decades of pattern recognition. Over the years, I have worked with hundreds of companies, across sectors, scales, and geographies. Startups, enterprises, legacy businesses, and emerging ventures. Some came to me for strategy. Some for insight. Some because they felt stuck but couldn't articulate why. Across these engagements, one thing became clear. Most failures do not come from lack of effort or talent. They come from misreading the direction of change. I observed businesses clinging to models that once worked but no longer fit reality. I saw organizations optimizing outdated processes while ignoring structural shifts. I saw individuals working harder each year for diminishing returns, confusing motion with progress. Alongside consulting, I became an investor in multiple ventures, not just with capital, but with involvement. Investing teaches humility. Markets punish illusion quickly. Only ideas aligned with future trajectories survive. These experiences sharpened my ability to distinguish trends from noise. Watching waves rise and fall. Over the years, I have witnessed multiple cycles. Technologies hailed as revolutionary, only to fade. Business models celebrated, then abandoned. Norms defended fiercely, then replaced overnight. I saw social media marketing rise. I saw SEO dominate. I saw app development explode. I saw freelancing ecosystems flourish. And then I watched many of them compress, commoditize, or collapse. A few years ago, content writing as a freelance profession was booming. Designers were in endless demand. Web developers and coders commanded premium rates. Entire ecosystems formed around these skills. Today, many of those same professionals are struggling, not because they lost ability, but because the ground beneath them shifted. AI did not politely ask for permission. It simply arrived. Why AI was different? I have seen the next big thing many times. Most were incremental. AI was not. When I studied AI deeply, not headlines, but capabilities, trajectories, and compounding effects, it became clear that this was not another tool cycle. This was a structural transformation of intelligence itself. AI was not improving what we do. It was changing who or what does it. That realization led me to establish an AI-focused organization, dedicated not just to tools, but to thinking frameworks. This is where the elevator theory of AI emerged. Not as a metaphor for hype, but as a model for understanding how humans move across layers of relevance as intelligence automates execution. I began speaking publicly, delivering keynotes, conducting workshops, and engaging with leaders who sensed disruption but lacked language for it. Why I wrote so much, and so fast. Over time, I wrote 40+ books on AI, not because the world needed more books, but because the conversation was dangerously shallow. Most AI content focused on tools, tutorials, hacks, prompts. Very little addressed structural job displacement, cognitive compression, human relevance, accountability, meaning. This book exists because that gap matters. It is not a how-to guide. It is a why you must wake up guide. Connecting the dots backward and forward. Everything in this book is a synthesis. Not theory in isolation. Not fear-based speculation. But pattern recognition across time. I have seen what happens when industries ignore early signals. Professionals delay adaptation. Institutions defend obsolete models. Individuals mistake effort for relevance. And I have seen the opposite. People who reposition early. Businesses that pivot before pressure arrives. Individuals who move from execution to insight. They do not escape disruption. They navigate it. Why this book exists. This book is not written to impress. It is written to warn responsibly. Because what is happening now is faster, deeper, and more unforgiving than previous cycles. AI is not eliminating jobs politely. It is compressing participation quietly. Entire professions are thinning. Middle layers are collapsing. Execution is losing value. And most people are still waiting for reassurance. This book does not offer reassurance. It offers clarity. If that makes you uncomfortable, it is doing its job. Why I am writing this now. I am eligible to write this book not because I predicted the future perfectly, but because I have spent years watching the present carefully. I have walked away from false certainty. I have studied cycles deeply. I have advised, invested, built, failed, adjusted, and continued. This book is my attempt to share what those years revealed before the window narrows further. Not everyone will agree with it. But those who ignore it may discover, too late, that reality did not wait for consensus. End of special chapter. Chapter 2, When History Whispered, and We Didn't Listen. History never shouts. It repeats. History does not announce itself with warnings. It whispers. And those whispers are almost always ignored by the majority, until they become screams. Every major transformation in human civilization followed the same tragic arc. Early signs appeared. A few noticed. Most dismissed them. And later, everyone paid the price. The future never arrives suddenly. It arrives gradually, then all at once. The AI revolution is not unique in this sense. What is unique is how fast it is unfolding. To understand where we are going, we must confront where we have been, because the patterns are eerily consistent. The artisan who trusted his skill too much. Before factories existed, skilled artisans ruled the economy. Cobblers, weavers, blacksmiths, carpenters. Their skills were not trivial. They were respected, refined, and passed down through generations. Then machines arrived. At first, they were crude, slow, inferior. Artisans laughed. These machines can never match human craftsmanship. They were right, initially. But machines didn't need to be perfect. They only needed to be faster, cheaper, scalable. Factories did not eliminate craftsmanship overnight. They outpaced it. By the time artisans realized the shift, the market had already moved. The lesson was brutal. Being better is useless if you are slower and more expensive. The typist who thought speed was enough. Fast forward to the 20th century. Professional typists were indispensable. They had speed, accuracy, specialized training. Typing was a career. Then computers entered offices. At first, they were intimidating, complex, unreliable. Many typists believed. Computers are tools. Someone will always need us. But then, word processors improved. Interfaces simplified. Anyone could type. Typing stopped being a profession. It became a baseline skill. And then it disappeared as a job altogether. No rebellion. No announcement. Just quiet irrelevance. The photographer who ignored the digital camera. Kodak once dominated photography. They invented the digital camera. And then dismissed it. Why? Because it threatened their film business. Executives believed. People love physical photos. Digital is a fad. They weren't stupid. They were comfortable. Digital photography didn't kill Kodak instantly. It slowly eroded its foundation. By the time the collapse was obvious, it was irreversible. History teaches a cruel lesson here. The biggest victims of change are often its inventors, when they refuse to adapt. The travel agent who trusted relationships. Travel agents once thrived on expertise and connections. Then came online booking platforms. Initially, limited destinations. Confusing interfaces. Inaccurate pricing. Travel agents laughed. People want human guidance. They were right, for a while. Then algorithms improved. Data became richer. User experience simplified. Human intermediaries became friction. And friction is always eliminated. The pattern no one wants to admit. Across centuries, industries, and technologies, the same pattern repeats with disturbing precision. The tools change. The professions change. The excuses change. But the sequence never does. 1. New technology appears, quietly, imperfectly. Every disruption begins small. The first versions are slow, inaccurate, limited, clumsy. Early steam engines were inefficient. Early computers filled rooms and crashed often. Early internet connections were painfully slow. Early AI systems made obvious mistakes. This stage is deceptive because it reassures the majority. People look at early flaws and conclude, this can't replace us. They confuse current limitations with future potential. History shows this is always a mistake. 2. it is dismissed as inferior, niche, or temporary. Once the technology exists, resistance follows. Not aggressive resistance, casual dismissal. Common phrases appear. It's just a tool. It's for hobbyists. It's not enterprise ready. Real professionals don't use this. This dismissal is not ignorance. It is identity protection. People defend their skills because those skills define their income, their status, their sense of worth. The irony is painful. The more experienced someone is, the more threatened they feel, and the more they dismiss change. 3. Early adopters gain advantage, quietly at first. While most people argue, a small minority experiments. Not because they fully understand the technology, but because they sense leverage. Early adopters accept imperfection. Learn through use. Build intuition early. At this stage, gains are uneven and invisible. They work faster. Produce more. Make fewer errors over time. But they don't announce it. History shows that advantage compounds silently before it becomes obvious. 4. Mass adoption accelerates, suddenly. Then something shifts. The technology reaches a tipping point. Costs drop. Interfaces improve. Reliability increases. Suddenly. What was optional becomes expected. What was impressive becomes normal. This phase feels abrupt to outsiders. It happened overnight. It didn't. It happened slowly, and then visibility arrived. At this stage, resistance collapses. Not because people agree, but because the market forces compliance. 5. Legacy roles collapse. Not with drama, but with drift. Contrary to popular belief, most professions don't disappear with explosions. They fade. Job postings decline. Salaries stagnate. Opportunities shrink. Work is redistributed. People don't wake up unemployed. They wake up irrelevant. And relevance is harder to fight than layoffs. This is where regret enters the story. 6. Explanations arrive too late. Only after collapse do explanations flourish. Books are written. Documentaries appear. Experts explain what went wrong. The analysis is always brilliant, and useless. Because explanations don't reverse displacement. They only comfort those already affected. Why this pattern is so predictable, yet so ignored. The tragedy is not change. Change is neutral. The tragedy is predictable blindness. Humans are excellent at short-term reasoning. Pattern denial. Overestimating stability. We assume tomorrow will look like today. Technology assumes tomorrow will be faster than today. These two assumptions collide, and technology always wins. Why predictable blindness feels rational. Predictable blindness doesn't feel like ignorance. It feels like experience, confidence, realism. People mistake familiarity with relevance. They think, I've seen trends come and go. But revolutions don't announce themselves as revolutions. They arrive disguised as tools. By the time they reveal their true nature, it's too late to opt out. Why AI fits this pattern perfectly. AI has already passed stages 1, 2, and 3. We are currently between stages 3 and 4. Early adopters are accelerating. Tools are improving weekly. Costs are collapsing. Resistance is weakening. Which means legacy roles have already begun collapsing, quietly. The loud phase hasn't started yet. The question that decides everything. History does not ask, are you talented? It asks, are you early enough? Because once mass adoption arrives, learning becomes survival, not advantage. And survival is always more expensive than preparation. Why humans resist change even when evidence is clear. The human brain is wired for survival, not foresight. Change threatens identity, status, comfort, predictability. So we rationalize. We say, this is just hype. It won't affect my role. My work is different. These sentences have echoed through history. They were spoken by artisans, by typists, by photographers, by travel agents, by retail workers, by journalists. Now they are spoken by coders, designers, analysts, writers, consultants. Different era. Same denial. The dangerous comfort of incremental change. The most deceptive thing about technological disruption is that it starts slowly. AI didn't begin by replacing jobs. It began by assisting. Autocomplete. Spellcheck. Recommendations. Suggestions. Helpful. Harmless. Convenient. But assistance is merely training wheels for replacement. Once trust is built, autonomy follows. History confirms this every single time. Why this time is different is usually wrong, and right. People often say, every generation thinks its disruption is the biggest. True. But sometimes, history genuinely breaks its own patterns. AI is one such moment. Why? Because this time, the technology learns. The tool improves itself. The system scales without humans. No previous revolution replaced thinking at scale. This is not mechanization. This is cognitive displacement. And history has no precedent for that. The shrinking time between revolutions. Consider the timeline. Agriculture thousands of years. Industrial Revolution centuries. Electricity decades. Computers years. Internet months. AI weeks. The gap between transformations is collapsing. Humans adapt linearly. Technology evolves exponentially. This mismatch creates casualties. Not because people are incapable, but because time is unforgiving. What history punishes more than ignorance? History does not punish ignorance as harshly as it punishes complacency. Ignorant people can learn. Complacent people don't feel the need to. The most dangerous mindset is, I have time. Every collapsed profession believed that. They didn't lack intelligence. They lacked urgency. Why studying the past is not nostalgia, it's survival. This chapter is not about history lessons. It is about pattern recognition. History does not care about your intentions. It cares about outcomes. And the outcome has always favored those who adapt early. Those who question comfort. Those who move before certainty. The rest are remembered only as examples. The question history asks you now. History is whispering again. Not through textbooks. But through layoff headlines. Automation tools. Productivity spikes. Shrinking teams. The question is not whether change is coming. The question is, will you listen this time? Because history is patient. But it is never kind to those who ignore it. End of Chapter 2. Chapter 3, this time the tool thinks. Every revolution had a boundary. This one doesn't. Every technological revolution in history had a ceiling. Steam engines amplified muscle. Electricity amplified reach. Computers amplified calculation. The internet amplified connection. But none of them crossed a certain invisible line. They never thought. They never reasoned. They never generated ideas. They never made decisions at scale without human initiation. Artificial intelligence does. And that single distinction changes the trajectory of humanity more than any machine ever built. Why the past no longer predicts the future. For generations, we relied on a comforting assumption. Machines replace effort, not intelligence. That assumption is now obsolete. AI does not replace hands. It replaces judgment, synthesis, creativity, and reasoning. The very traits humans believed made them irreplaceable. This is not a faster tool. This is a different category of actor. And history offers no safe template for this shift. From tools to partners to replacements. Technology always follows a progression. 1. Tool, assists humans. 2. Partner, collaborates with humans. 3. Replacement, removes the need for humans. AI has already crossed from stage 1 to stage 2. Stage 3 is not speculation. It is deployment timing. At first, AI corrected grammar. Then it wrote paragraphs. Then it structured arguments. Now it drafts strategies, codebases, designs, diagnoses, and business plans. Not with human supervision at every step. But with human approval at the end. That distinction matters. The illusion of control. Many professionals still believe. As long as humans are in the loop, we're safe. But human in the loop is shrinking. What used to mean continuous supervision now means occasional validation. AI systems already detect errors, optimize outputs, learn from feedback, improve autonomously. Human involvement is becoming ceremonial. A checkbox. A sign-off. A liability buffer. And once trust crosses a threshold, even that disappears. Why thinking was the last fortress? Humans survived every previous disruption because they owned one domain. Cognition. We could interpret nuance. Create meaning. Apply context. Combine ideas. AI was never supposed to do that. Until it did. Today, AI writes poetry. Designs architecture. Diagnoses diseases. Writes legal drafts. Codes complex systems. Not perfectly. But well enough. And in markets, good enough at scale always beats perfect but scarce. The collapse of the knowledge advantage. For centuries, education was protection. Degrees mattered because knowledge was scarce. Expertise took years to build. Information was gated. AI destroys scarcity. Any explanation. Any concept. Any framework. Instant. On demand. At near zero cost. This doesn't mean education is useless. It means education alone is no longer differentiating. What matters now is how fast you apply. How well you adapt. How intelligently you collaborate with machines. And that is a brutal shift for systems built on credentials. Why AI feels unsettling even to experts. Even seasoned professionals feel uneasy. Not because AI is inaccurate. But because it is confident. It doesn't hesitate. It doesn't second guess. It doesn't tire. Humans, in contrast. Doubt. Fatigue. Overthink. This psychological imbalance matters. In decision-heavy environments, confidence often wins, regardless of origin. That is why AI outputs are increasingly trusted by default. The shift from execution to oversight. In the AI era, the value chain is flipping. Previously, value came from doing the work. Now, value comes from deciding what work should be done. Evaluating outputs. Framing problems correctly. Execution is becoming automated. Intent is becoming human. But even intent is under pressure. Because AI is now learning to suggest goals, identify opportunities, recommend strategies. The boundary keeps moving. Why, "I'll learn later," is a dangerous thought. Many professionals delay engagement with AI because tools feel overwhelming. Change feels optional. Current roles still exist. This is the most dangerous phase. Because by the time AI feels unavoidable, early adopters are far ahead. Expectations have shifted. Entry-level relevance is gone. Learning AI late doesn't make you obsolete. But it makes you expensive to retrain. And markets don't favor expensive transitions. This is not about becoming technical. A critical misunderstanding must be dismantled. Learning AI does not mean becoming a data scientist, writing algorithms, understanding neural networks. It means knowing what AI can do, knowing when to trust it, knowing when to challenge it, knowing how to frame problems for it. This is cognitive literacy, not technical mastery. And those who acquire it early gain leverage. The quiet replacement of cognitive labor. The most unsettling truth is this. AI is not replacing jobs. It is replacing tasks. And jobs are just collections of tasks. Once enough tasks are automated, the job collapses naturally. No announcement. No revolution. Just redundancy. This is why disruption feels invisible until it's irreversible. Why this chapter matters more than any other. Chapter 1 showed you the storm. Chapter 2 showed you the pattern. This chapter shows you the break from history. For the first time, intelligence is scalable. Thinking is automated. Cognition is commoditized. And when intelligence becomes cheap, human value must be redefined. The question you can no longer avoid. The question is no longer, will AI think? It already does. The question is, will you think differently because of it? Because those who treat AI as just another tool will be replaced by those who treat it as a force. And those who ignore it entirely will be replaced by both. End of Chapter 3. Chapter 4, The One-Person Organization. There was a time when growth meant hiring. More clients meant more people. More work meant more teams. More ambition meant bigger offices. Headcount was a badge of success. An organization with thousands of employees was seen as powerful, stable, important. Careers were built around this assumption. Business schools taught scaling through manpower. Managers learned to lead people, coordinate teams, and optimize workflows designed for humans. That world is quietly dissolving. Not collapsing overnight. Not announced in headlines. But being replaced, line by line, role by role, by something far more efficient. The one-person organization. At first, this idea sounds absurd. How can one person replace a department? How can one mind do what once required dozens? But this question assumes that the person is doing the work. In the AI era, the person is no longer the worker. The person is the conductor. And the orchestra is made of machines. In earlier decades, productivity gains were incremental. A better tool helped you do your job slightly faster. Software shaved minutes, sometimes hours, off a task. But the core structure of work remained intact. Humans still executed. Humans still produced. Humans still carried the cognitive load. AI breaks this structure entirely. Now, a single individual can ideate, generate, refine, analyze, and deliver outcomes that once required entire teams. Not because the individual has suddenly become superhuman, but because the tools have absorbed the execution. The human no longer writes the first draft. The human no longer creates the base design. The human no longer builds from scratch. The human decides, guides, and approves. That distinction changes the economics of work forever. Consider content creation. Once, a company needed writers, editors, proofreaders, designers, and distribution managers. Each role added time, cost, and coordination overhead. Today, one individual can generate long-form content, marketing copies, social media campaigns, visuals, and even video scripts in a single workflow, assisted by AI systems trained on brand voice, audience behavior, and performance data. The output is not identical to human-only work. It doesn't need to be. It only needs to be fast, consistent, and scalable. Markets reward speed and volume long before they reward perfection. The same compression is happening in software development. What once required front-end developers, back-end engineers, testers, and documentation teams can now be initiated, structured, and iterated by one technically aware individual using AI coding systems. The code is generated. The bugs are suggested. The optimizations are proposed. The documentation is written. The human's role shifts from creator to architect and reviewer. And once again, the team dissolves not because people failed, but because the system no longer needs them. This is where many people misunderstand what is happening. They believe AI is eliminating jobs. That is not accurate. AI is eliminating organizational density. It is collapsing layers. Middle layers first. Every organization has always been full of invisible work. Coordination. Follow-ups. Meetings. Approvals. Rework. AI does not get tired of this invisible work. It thrives on it. Where humans needed meetings, AI needs prompts. Where humans needed managers, AI needs parameters. Where humans needed supervision, AI needs feedback loops. The friction disappears. And friction was the reason teams were large. The uncomfortable truth is this. Most organizations were never optimized for value creation. They were optimized for human limitations. AI removes those limitations. Which means the organization itself must shrink. This is why companies no longer celebrate headcount. They celebrate output per person. Revenue per employee. Productivity per role. Efficiency per dollar. These metrics quietly favor fewer humans. Not because leaders are cruel, but because competition is unforgiving. Any organization that refuses to optimize will be outpaced by one that does. And optimization, in the AI era, means compression. The one-person organization is not always literally one person. Sometimes it is 2. Sometimes 5. Sometimes 10. But the principle remains the same. Fewer humans managing exponentially more output. And once that principle is proven, it spreads rapidly. Because nothing scales faster than a proven advantage. This shift does something deeply unsettling to professional identity. For decades, value was associated with effort. Long hours meant commitment. Complex processes meant importance. Busyness meant relevance. AI destroys this illusion. Now, value is associated with clarity of intent. The person who knows what to ask, what to prioritize, and what to discard becomes more valuable than the person who works the hardest. Effort loses its moral advantage. Outcome becomes everything. This is why the one-person organization feels so threatening. It exposes an uncomfortable truth. Much of what humans did was never about creativity or intelligence. It was about execution under constraint. AI removes the constraint. And what remains is uncomfortable to face. Many people respond by saying, but humans are still needed. Yes. But needed where, and how many? Not at the same scale. Not in the same roles. Not with the same security. This is the part that optimism refuses to confront. Earlier, when technology advanced, humans were absorbed elsewhere. More factories meant more workers. More offices meant more clerks. More software meant more IT staff. Now, more AI means less absorption. The output increases. The workforce does not. This breaks a social contract that existed for centuries. The one-person organization is not just a business model. It is a signal. A signal that the economy no longer guarantees participation. That survival now depends on leverage, not labor. That relevance now depends on adaptability, not loyalty. This is why learning AI is not about becoming exceptional. It is about not becoming invisible. Those who understand how to work with AI will sit at the center of these compressed organizations. Those who don't will remain on the periphery, if they remain at all. The most unsettling part is not that this is coming. It is that it is already happening. Quietly. Efficiently. Without apology. And by the time it becomes obvious, the structure of work will already be rewritten. The one-person organization is not the future. It is the preview. And in the chapters ahead, the picture only becomes sharper. End of Chapter 4. Chapter 5, Automation is no longer general. It's targeted. For a long time, automation felt distant. It was broad, vague, almost abstract. Machines automated factories. Software automated accounting. Systems automated scheduling and reporting. It felt impersonal. It felt slow. It felt like something that happened around people, not to them. That illusion is over. Automation has evolved. It is no longer general. It is no longer exploratory. It is no longer experimenting. Automation today is targeted. And that changes everything. Earlier waves of automation replaced processes. This wave replaces functions. Entire roles. Entire departments. Entire career paths. Not gradually. Not partially. But decisively. In the past, automation needed humans to adapt around it. Today, humans are being asked to adapt out of its way. This is the silent shift most people have not fully grasped. Targeted automation is not built to assist everyone. It is built to eliminate specific bottlenecks. And the moment a role is identified as a bottleneck, its days are numbered. Consider customer support. For decades, call centers were considered safe jobs. They were human. They required empathy. They handled nuance. They managed frustration. Early automation attempts failed miserably. Robotic voices. Scripted responses. Endless loops. People laughed. Customers complained. Executives reassured employees. Then something changed. AI learned context. AI learned sentiment. AI learned intent. And suddenly, the human advantage evaporated. A targeted AI system does not get tired of angry customers. It does not lose patience. It does not escalate emotionally. It does not forget policies. It does not deviate from compliance. It handles one conversation, or 1 million, with the same precision. And once that system works well enough, the question is no longer, should we use it? The question becomes, why would we not? At that point, the human role becomes economically indefensible. This is how targeted automation works. It doesn't replace people. It replaces justifications. The same pattern is repeating across professions. Coding was once thought immune. Too complex. Too creative. Too logical. Then coding-specific AI models appeared. Not general chatbots. Not assistants. Specialists. Models trained exclusively on programming languages, code patterns, debugging logic, optimization techniques. They don't get distracted. They don't multitask. They don't forget syntax. They exist for one purpose. And they perform it relentlessly. Targeted automation does not aim to help coders. It aims to reduce dependency on them. One experienced engineer overseeing AI-generated code is cheaper, faster, and more scalable than an entire development team. This is not speculation. This is already standard practice in many organizations. Design followed the same path. Once upon a time, design was sacred. It was taste. It was intuition. It was emotion. Now, design-specific AI tools generate layouts, branding systems, illustrations, and even animations in seconds. They don't replace creativity. They industrialize it. When creativity becomes industrialized, its market value collapses. Not because it disappears, but because it becomes abundant. Targeted automation does something psychologically devastating. It removes the illusion of uniqueness. People believed, my role is too specific to automate. Targeted AI is built precisely for specificity. The narrower the task, the easier it is to automate. General automation struggled with nuance. Targeted automation thrives on it. That is the paradox most people miss. Earlier automation replaced routine. Targeted automation replaces expertise. Because expertise follows patterns. And patterns are exactly what AI excels at. This is why resistance feels futile. You are not fighting a generic system. You are fighting a tool designed specifically to do what you do, faster, cheaper, and at scale. Another uncomfortable truth emerges here, and it is one that deeply unsettles the traditional idea of career security. Targeted automation does not eliminate roles evenly. It does not arrive like a flood that sweeps everyone away at once. It arrives like a precision instrument, cutting selectively, surgically, and with unsettling accuracy. Some roles remain untouched for a while others disappear quietly, without warning, without drama, and often without resistance. And here is where the misunderstanding begins. The first roles to go are not the weakest performers. They are not the careless, the unskilled, or the disengaged. In fact, very often, the opposite is true. The first roles to be automated are held by people who are consistent, reliable, and experienced. People whose work follows clear structures, defined processes, stable rules, and predictable outcomes. Predictability is efficiency for humans. Predictability is gold for machines. When a role produces similar outputs again and again, even at a high level of quality, it becomes easy to observe, document, and model. Once a task can be described clearly, it can be replicated. Once it can be replicated, it can be automated. And once it can be automated, the economic argument becomes impossible to ignore. This is why experience alone does not protect you. In earlier eras, experience meant judgment. It meant intuition earned over time. It meant the ability to handle edge cases and unexpected situations. But targeted automation feeds on experience. It studies it. It learns from it. It absorbs it. Senior professionals often unknowingly provide the most valuable training data. Clean processes, best practices, optimal decisions, and refined workflows. Ironically, the more structured and disciplined someone's work becomes, the easier it is to encode. In some cases, experience does not slow down replacement. It accelerates it. Because experience reduces randomness. And randomness is one of the last defenses humans have. Highly experienced professionals often pride themselves on doing things the right way, every time. But machines thrive on every time. They do not tire of repetition. They do not lose focus. They do not deviate. What feels like mastery in a human becomes a blueprint for automation. This is why the danger is not incompetence. The danger is being perfectly predictable. And that is a deeply uncomfortable realization, because it means that doing your job well is no longer enough. In a world of targeted automation, the safest roles are not always the most efficient ones, but the least codifiable ones. The roles where context shifts constantly, where ambiguity dominates, and where outcomes cannot be cleanly defined. Targeted automation does not chase weakness. It chases clarity. And wherever clarity exists without complexity, replacement is only a matter of time. This is where many professionals miscalculate. They believe seniority equals safety. But targeted AI often learns from senior professionals first. Their work becomes training data. Their decisions become patterns. Their expertise becomes code. Once encoded, it no longer needs them. This is not malice. It is efficiency. And efficiency has no loyalty. Targeted automation also changes how organizations think, and this shift in thinking is far more consequential than any single technology. In the past, organizations were built around people. Roles existed first, and systems were designed to support those roles. When performance issues arose, the instinctive question was human-centric. How do we support this role better? Should we provide training? Add more staff? Improve tools? Adjust workflows? The underlying assumption was always the same: the role itself was permanent, and the human occupying it was the variable. Targeted automation reverses this logic completely. Organizations no longer begin with the role. They begin with the function. The question quietly shifts from who should do this work to does this work need a human at all? And once that question enters the conversation, the role is no longer protected by tradition, tenure, or past importance. When leaders ask, "Can this function be systematized?" they are not thinking about people. They are thinking about repeatability, cost, speed, accuracy, and scalability. They are evaluating whether a sequence of actions can be defined clearly enough to be turned into a process, whether a process can be converted into logic, and whether that logic can be executed by a system more reliably than a human ever could. Once the answer is yes, the discussion fundamentally changes. It is no longer about if the role will be automated. It becomes a question of when. Timing replaces debate. The remaining considerations are budgets, integration, risk tolerance, and public optics, not human value. The decision becomes strategic, not emotional. What makes this shift especially dangerous is that it often happens quietly, behind closed doors, long before any visible changes occur. Roles continue to exist on paper. People continue to work. Performance reviews continue as usual. But in parallel, the organization is mapping workflows, documenting decision paths, collecting data, and testing systems designed to eventually make the role unnecessary. By the time the outcome becomes visible, the decision has already been made. This is why targeted automation feels sudden to employees but slow to executives. From the inside, it appears as an overnight restructuring. From the top, it feels like a carefully timed optimization that has been in motion for months or even years. And once a function is systematized, there is no natural reason to stop at partial automation. Systems do not demand career paths. They do not need motivation. They do not negotiate. They simply scale. That inevitability is what makes targeted automation so final. This is why job losses today feel cold. No emotional announcements. No dramatic shifts. Just quiet restructuring. Roles don't disappear overnight. They stop growing. They stop hiring. They stop being promoted. Then they stop existing. The most unsettling realization is this. Targeted automation does not need AI to be perfect. It only needs AI to be better than average. Markets do not reward excellence. They reward consistency at scale. And machines excel at consistency. This is why the future of work will not be decided by talent alone. It will be decided by how easily your role can be isolated and automated. Not your passion. Not your dedication. Not your effort. Your replaceability. This is where learning AI becomes existential. Not to build systems. Not to compete with machines. But to understand where automation is headed. How roles are being carved apart. Where humans still add irreplaceable value. Ignoring this is not optimism. It is surrender. Targeted automation is not coming for everyone at once, and that is precisely what makes it so effective, and so dangerous. It does not arrive as a single, sweeping force that triggers panic or resistance. It does not need to announce itself. It does not need permission. Instead, it advances quietly, deliberately, and with remarkable patience. One small implementation here. One pilot project there. Each step seems reasonable in isolation, even responsible. After all, the goal is efficiency, not disruption, or so it appears. Targeted automation does not aim to replace entire workforces overnight. It doesn't need to. It only needs to keep moving forward, steadily and consistently, embedding itself deeper into organizational workflows. One function at a time, it takes over tasks that are easiest to define, measure, and optimize. These are often the tasks no one feels emotionally attached to, the ones described as routine, repetitive, or operational. Then it moves on. One role at a time, responsibilities are trimmed, reshaped, and quietly absorbed by systems. Job descriptions shrink without being rewritten. Teams remain intact, but workloads shift. People don't lose jobs immediately, they lose relevance first. The role still exists in name, but its core value has already been extracted and automated. And then comes the most subtle step of all. One justification at a time, the reason for human involvement disappears. First, its accuracy. Then its speed. Then its cost. Each justification is challenged, weakened, and eventually removed. What remains is a role with no defensible purpose in an environment obsessed with optimization. This is how targeted automation wins, not through force, but through persistence. By the time the pattern becomes visible, it no longer matters who notices. The system is already in place, advancing not because it is aggressive, but because nothing is stopping it. By the time the pattern becomes obvious to most people, the system will already be built, and more importantly, it will already be embedded. Not sitting in a lab. Not running as a pilot. But woven quietly into daily operations, decision pipelines, and performance metrics. At that stage, automation is no longer an idea being discussed, it is an infrastructure being depended upon. This is how disruption truly succeeds. Not when it is debated. But when it becomes invisible. When dashboards rely on it. When managers trust its outputs. When clients experience its speed. When budgets assume its efficiency. By the time people finally say, something has changed, the organization has already reorganized itself around the system. Workflows have been redesigned. Expectations have shifted. Human roles have been narrowed. What once required judgment now requires approval. What once required expertise now requires validation. Preparation, at that point, becomes reaction. And reaction is always late. Those who did not prepare do not suddenly lose their jobs overnight. What they lose first is leverage. They discover that their contribution can be replicated faster elsewhere. That their skill set is broadly interchangeable. That their experience, once valuable, no longer creates differentiation in a system optimized for scale. This is when a harsh truth emerges, one that feels unfair but is economically unavoidable. In a world of targeted automation, general skills are no longer enough. Being good at many things offers comfort, not protection. General skills made sense when work was fragmented across teams and humans were needed everywhere. But targeted automation thrives on clarity and specialization. It replaces the middle ground first. The broad, adaptable, but predictable skill sets that once formed the backbone of organizations. What survives is not general capability, but contextual intelligence. The ability to frame problems machines cannot yet understand. The ability to connect domains rather than merely operate within them. The ability to guide systems, question outputs, and make decisions when patterns break. Those who fail to adapt discover this too late. They are not rejected because they are incompetent. They are sidelined because the system no longer needs broadly capable humans, it needs fewer, sharper ones who know how to work with automation rather than alongside it. And once that realization arrives, the system is no longer waiting. End of Chapter 5. Chapter 6, Inflation, Pressure, and the Perfect Storm. There are moments in history when a single disruption reshapes society. A war. A recession. A technological breakthrough. Human systems are surprisingly good at absorbing one shock at a time. This era is not facing one shock. It is facing many, simultaneously. And that is what makes this moment uniquely dangerous. Artificial intelligence did not arrive in a vacuum. It arrived at a time when economic, physical, psychological, and social systems were already under stress. Had AI emerged during a period of abundance and stability, the transition would still have been painful, but manageable. Instead, it has landed in the middle of global fragility. Inflation is high. Healthcare systems are strained. Mental health is deteriorating. Social expectations are relentless. And now, job security, the final psychological anchor for most people, is eroding. This convergence is not coincidence. It is what turns disruption into a perfect storm. Inflation, on its own, is not new. Human societies have dealt with rising prices many times before. But inflation today is not merely about economics. It has seeped into daily decision-making, shaping how people think, plan, and cope. Every expense now feels heavier. Every financial decision carries more risk. Every delay feels more costly. Inflation compresses margin, not just for businesses, but for individuals. When people live with thinner margins, their tolerance for uncertainty collapses. And AI introduces maximum uncertainty. For organizations, inflation changes priorities instantly, and it does so in a way that is often invisible to those outside leadership rooms. When costs rise unpredictably, long-term vision becomes a luxury. 5-year roadmaps lose relevance. Even 3-year plans start to feel optimistic. Decision-making collapses inward, toward the immediate quarter, the next balance sheet, the next earnings call. Survival thinking replaces growth thinking. In this environment, the first thing that quietly slips down the priority list is people development. Training programs are no longer seen as investments, they are reclassified as expenses. Upskilling initiatives are postponed until conditions improve. Hiring slows, then freezes. Promotions are delayed. Career paths become vague. The language subtly shifts from building talent to managing costs. Loyalty, which once carried moral and cultural weight, becomes negotiable. Not because leaders suddenly stop caring about people, but because inflation reframes every decision in terms of risk. A loyal employee still costs more each year. A human still takes time to learn. A human still varies in performance. And inflation makes variability dangerous. Under sustained inflationary pressure, businesses stop asking human-centric questions like, how do we grow our people? How do we support this role better? How do we build long-term capability? Those questions feel slow. They feel uncertain. They feel expensive. Instead, a different set of questions takes over. How do we reduce dependency on individuals? How do we stabilize output regardless of who is present? How do we remove variability from performance, timelines, and quality? These are not cruel questions. They are survival questions. And this is exactly where AI thrives. AI does not demand raises to keep up with inflation. AI does not get sick, burn out, or resign at critical moments. AI does not vary wildly between best days and worst days. In an inflated economy, predictability becomes more valuable than potential. Consistency becomes more valuable than growth. And systems are always more predictable than humans. Automation, then, is not adopted because leaders are heartless or anti-human. It is adopted because inflation punishes inefficiency mercilessly. When margins are thin, even small inefficiencies become existential threats. What was once tolerable slack becomes unacceptable waste. Every redundant role suddenly stands out. Every duplicated effort becomes visible. Every delay has a measurable cost. Inflation turns invisible inefficiencies into visible numbers. Human limitations, once absorbed as part of doing business, are converted into line items. Slower onboarding becomes a cost. Learning curves become a cost. Errors become a cost. Absences become a cost. Even coordination between people becomes a cost. AI, by contrast, offers something inflation-stressed organizations crave above all else: control. Control over output. Control over timelines. Control over costs. In this context, choosing automation is not a philosophical decision. It is an economic reflex. And once that reflex sets in, it reshapes the organization permanently, long before employees realize the ground beneath them has shifted. Now layer health into this picture, and the situation becomes even more fragile. The modern professional is not stepping into the AI era fresh, rested, and curious. They are entering it already drained, physically, mentally, and emotionally. Years of continuous pressure have accumulated, leaving very little reserve capacity. This matters, because adaptation requires energy, and most people are operating without surplus. Burnout is no longer an exception reserved for extreme cases or high-pressure roles. It has quietly become the baseline. Being tired all the time is no longer seen as a warning sign, it is seen as normal. Chronic exhaustion has been rebranded as dedication. Mental fatigue is mistaken for responsibility. Long working hours are no longer limited to offices. Work follows people home through phones, notifications, and constant connectivity. The boundary between professional and personal life has blurred to the point of disappearance. Even rest is interrupted by the awareness that something might need attention at any moment. This constant state of alertness takes a measurable toll. Stress-related illnesses are rising steadily. Anxiety and depression are no longer rare conditions, they are becoming socially normalized experiences. People function through them rather than recovering from them. Productivity is maintained not through health, but through endurance. And this is the human workforce that AI is being introduced into. Not a rested workforce. Not a curious workforce. But an exhausted one. Into this already strained system enters a technology that does not share human limitations. AI does not fatigue after long hours. It does not lose focus late in the day. It does not require weekends, vacations, or recovery time. It does not struggle with motivation, mood, or mental health. It does not need balance to function. The contrast is stark. While humans slow down under pressure, machines accelerate. While people need pauses to recover, systems scale continuously. What feels unsustainable for humans feels optimal for machines. The comparison is deeply unfair, but markets have never been fair systems. Markets do not reward effort. They do not protect health. They do not account for emotional strain. Markets reward efficiency. And efficiency does not include compassion for human limits. It does not pause because people are tired. It does not slow because adaptation feels overwhelming. It simply selects what performs consistently under pressure. In such an environment, exhausted humans are not competing against machines on equal terms. They are competing while already depleted. And that imbalance, more than any single technological feature, explains why the pressure of this era feels so crushing, and why the adoption of AI feels not just inevitable, but relentless. This exhaustion matters more than most people realize. When humans are tired, learning feels harder. Adaptation feels heavier. Change feels threatening rather than exciting. This is why so many people resist AI, not because they don't understand it, but because they don't have the energy to engage with it. AI arrives asking for curiosity at a time when people are just trying to survive. Now add peer pressure to this equation. And the weight multiplies silently but relentlessly. Never before in human history have people compared themselves so frequently, so publicly, and with such emotional intensity. Comparison is no longer occasional or accidental, it is continuous, algorithm-driven, and unavoidable. Every scroll exposes someone else's success, someone else's progress, someone else's milestones, carefully curated, highly polished, and stripped of context. Social platforms showcase outcomes, not journeys. They show promotions, not years of uncertainty. They show achievements, not anxiety. They show confidence, not doubt. Career milestones are broadcast without the struggle that preceded them. Failures are edited out. Pauses are hidden. Detours are erased. What remains is an illusion of smooth, linear progress, an illusion that quietly convinces people that everyone else is moving faster, adapting better, and staying ahead more easily. This distortion creates a silent competition. Not the healthy kind that inspires growth, but the exhausting kind that never switches off. People begin to feel they must do everything at once. Earn more, because inflation is rising and lifestyles feel fragile. Learn faster, because skills seem to expire overnight. Stay relevant, because irrelevance now feels terminal. Remain optimistic, because showing fear feels like weakness. And they are expected to do all of this while already navigating economic pressure, health strain and burnout, job uncertainty, emotional fatigue. There is no pause button. In this environment, AI does not arrive as a neutral tool. It arrives as one more demand layered onto an already overloaded system. Another thing to learn. Another skill to acquire. Another benchmark to meet. Another reminder that standing still is falling behind. Learn AI no longer sounds like curiosity or opportunity. It sounds like urgency. Like an ultimatum. Like a countdown. For someone already stretched thin, this message does not inspire excitement. It triggers anxiety. The mind does not ask, what can AI help me become? It asks, what happens if I don't keep up? This is why resistance to AI often masquerades as skepticism. It is not always disbelief in the technology. More often, it is exhaustion speaking. People are not rejecting AI because they think it is useless. They are resisting because they feel they cannot afford another race. Peer pressure turns adaptation into a performance. It turns learning into comparison. And it turns opportunity into threat. In such a climate, the fear is not just of losing a job. It is the fear of falling behind publicly, visibly, and permanently, while everyone else appears to be moving forward effortlessly. And that fear, layered on top of inflation and exhaustion, is what makes this moment so psychologically heavy, and so difficult to navigate without clarity. Expectations have never been higher, and never more contradictory. Organizations want agility but also stability. Families want security but also growth. Society wants innovation but also employment. Individuals are caught in the middle. They are expected to be adaptable without guidance, resilient without support, and optimistic without certainty. This psychological pressure is unprecedented. And pressure changes behavior. Under pressure, humans do not explore. This is not a flaw of character. It is a survival instinct built into us over thousands of years. When uncertainty rises and resources feel threatened, the human brain shifts from curiosity to conservation. It stops asking what is possible and starts asking what is safe. In moments of pressure, people do not expand their horizons. They narrow them. They conserve energy. They reduce risk. They retreat into the familiar. This is why, during times of disruption, most people cling to the skills they already have. Even when those skills are clearly losing value. Familiar abilities feel like shelter. They represent past success, past validation, and past security. Letting go of them feels like abandoning identity itself. Uncomfortable learning is postponed. New tools feel threatening rather than exciting. People tell themselves they will adapt later, when things are calmer, when they have more time, when the path is clearer. Delay feels rational. It feels cautious. It feels responsible. And beneath all of this lies a quiet hope. A hope that disruption will slow down. A hope that the noise will settle. A hope that this wave, like others before it, will pass. That hope is understandable, but it is misplaced. AI does not slow down in response to human anxiety. It does not sense hesitation. It does not wait for confidence to build. It continues to improve, train, scale, and integrate at a pace dictated by computation and competition, not human comfort. Markets behave the same way. Markets do not pause for emotional readiness. They reward speed, efficiency, and early advantage. They do not ask whether people have had time to adjust. They simply move toward whatever delivers results faster and cheaper. Organizations that hesitate are overtaken by those that don't. Technology, too, does not wait for social consensus. It does not require agreement, permission, or cultural alignment to advance. By the time society debates the implications, the systems are already deployed, normalized, and relied upon. This creates a profound and dangerous mismatch. Humans slow down under pressure. Technology accelerates. Humans wait for clarity. Markets move on partial certainty. Humans seek reassurance. Systems demand adaptation. In this gap between human hesitation and technological acceleration, a new condition emerges, one more damaging than ignorance, fear, or even resistance. Delay under pressure. Delay under pressure feels logical. It feels like caution. But in reality, it compounds vulnerability. Each moment of hesitation reduces options. Each postponed decision narrows pathways. What could have been exploration becomes reaction. What could have been preparation becomes damage control. By the time pressure eases, if it ever does, the landscape has already changed. Expectations have shifted. Standards have risen. Entry points have moved. And those who delayed discover they are no longer late, they are misaligned. This is why this moment is so unforgiving. Not because change is fast, but because pressure is high. Not because AI is powerful, but because humans are exhausted. Not because adaptation is impossible, but because waiting feels safer than moving forward. And yet, it is precisely this instinct, to wait under pressure, that makes the risk existential. Because in an accelerating world, delay is not neutral. It is a decision. And it is almost always the wrong one. Job loss in this environment feels different. Because it is different. Not just in scale, but in consequence. In earlier periods of stability, losing a job was painful, often frightening, but it was usually recoverable. Markets were expanding. Roles were being created elsewhere. Skills remained relevant long enough for people to regroup, retrain, and re-enter the workforce with dignity and confidence. Today, that safety net has thinned dramatically. Losing a job during a stable economic cycle hurts the present. Losing a job during inflation and automation threatens the future. Inflation ensures that financial pressure is immediate and relentless. Savings erode faster. Fixed expenses weigh heavier. There is less room to pause, reflect, or experiment. At the same time, automation ensures that the role you lost may not exist in its previous form anywhere else. You are not simply unemployed, you may be misaligned with the market. Re-entry becomes harder because the ground keeps shifting beneath your feet. The skills that were valuable when you were hired may no longer be enough by the time you search again. Job descriptions evolve rapidly. Expectations inflate along with prices. Employers want more capability, more adaptability, more output, often for less cost. Competition intensifies in ways that are not immediately visible. You are no longer competing only with other professionals. You are competing with systems that do not sleep, do not negotiate, and do not forget. You are competing with candidates who learned new tools while you were stabilizing. You are competing in a market that favors speed over potential. And then time enters the equation as an adversary. Each month without relevance adds friction. Skills decay not because they are forgotten, but because the market moves on. Confidence erodes. Networks weaken. Self-doubt creeps in. The longer the gap, the more explanation is required, and explanations do not restore leverage. Each delay narrows options. Roles that once felt attainable begin to feel out of reach. People start aiming lower, not because they lack ability, but because urgency replaces aspiration. Choices become reactive rather than strategic. This is why layoffs today feel like identity shocks, not just career setbacks. Work is no longer just a source of income. It is tied to self-worth, competence, and place in a rapidly changing world. When that anchor is removed in an era of inflation and automation, the loss is not merely professional, it is existential. The fear is not just what will I do next. It is will there still be a place for me? And that question cuts deeper than any job loss in calmer times ever did. This is also why comforting narratives fail. Phrases like, "things will stabilize," or "this is temporary," were born in eras where systems moved slowly and recovery followed disruption. AI breaks that rhythm. By the time stability arrives, the nature of work may already be transformed. Waiting for calm before adapting is no longer viable. This chapter is not meant to overwhelm. It is meant to explain why hesitation now carries more weight than ever before. In earlier times, waiting meant lost opportunity. In this time, waiting risks lost relevance. The storm is not defined by AI alone. It is defined by AI colliding with inflation, exhaustion, pressure, and expectation, all at once. The danger in a storm is not the force of the wind. Humanity has survived storms before, economic storms, social storms, technological storms. Wind can be endured. Pressure can be resisted. Even disruption can be navigated. What truly destroys people in a storm is losing direction. When direction is lost, strength becomes irrelevant. Effort becomes wasteful. Movement becomes random. And stillness begins to feel like the only rational choice. In moments of rapid change, people are not defeated by impact, they are defeated by confusion. They don't know what to prioritize anymore. Everything suddenly feels urgent, yet nothing feels clear. Learning feels necessary, but the learning path feels uncertain. They don't know which skills will matter next. The skills that once guaranteed stability now feel fragile. New skills appear constantly, each promising relevance, each demanding time and energy. They don't know what will last. Industries shift. Roles mutate. Tools evolve. What looks valuable today might be obsolete tomorrow. This uncertainty is psychologically paralyzing. When the mind cannot establish a clear direction, it defaults to protection. It stops advancing and starts guarding what it already has. In that state, action feels risky, exploration feels reckless, and commitment feels dangerous. In that confusion, many people choose inaction, not because they are lazy or ignorant, but because inaction feels safer than choosing the wrong path. It feels safer to wait than to move in the wrong direction. It feels safer to hold on to familiar ground than to step into uncertainty. Stillness begins to feel safe. Stillness feels controllable. At least nothing is lost immediately. At least identity remains intact. At least the illusion of stability survives a little longer. But storms do not respect stillness. In a storm, standing still does not mean staying safe, it means becoming exposed. Wind does not pass around those who wait. It hits hardest those who stop navigating. The storm continues to move, and those who fail to adjust are gradually pushed off course without realizing it. In times of profound change, direction matters more than speed. And choosing no direction at all is still a choice, one that quietly hands control to forces that do not care about comfort, fear, or readiness. In a storm, survival does not belong to the strongest or the calmest. It belongs to those who keep orienting themselves, even imperfectly. Because when the world is moving, stillness is not stability. It is vulnerability. This is why this moment demands clarity, not comfort. Clarity about what is changing. Clarity about what is accelerating. Clarity about what can no longer be postponed. Because storms do not ask if you are ready. They only reveal whether you prepared. End of Chapter 6. Chapter 7, The Great Myth, AI Won't Take Your Job. Every technological revolution produces fear. But more importantly, every technological revolution produces stories, stories designed to manage that fear. In the age of artificial intelligence, the most repeated story is deceptively simple. AI won't take your job. Someone using AI will. This sentence has spread faster than almost any other idea in the modern workplace. CEOs repeat it. Influencers amplify it. Motivational speakers wrap it in optimism. It appears in LinkedIn posts, keynote talks, corporate town halls, and policy discussions. It sounds reassuring. It sounds empowering. It sounds actionable. And that is exactly why it is dangerous. Because it is not false. It is incomplete. And in periods of civilizational change, incomplete truths are more harmful than lies. Why this sentence became so popular. This sentence survives, spreads, and repeats itself everywhere not because it is precise, but because it satisfies three powerful psychological needs at the same time, needs that become especially dominant during periods of uncertainty and fear. First, it preserves human agency. In times of disruption, people desperately want to believe that they are still in control of their future. The idea that someone using AI will take your job reframes displacement as a personal choice rather than an external force. It reassures individuals that outcomes depend on effort, adaptability, and willingness to learn. This belief is comforting because it keeps fear at bay. It tells people they are not victims of a system, but active participants in a competition they can still win. Psychologically, this matters enormously. Humans cope better with risk when they believe they have agency, even if that agency is partial or symbolic. The sentence restores a sense of control at a moment when control is visibly eroding. That is why it feels empowering, even when it is incomplete. Second, the sentence avoids systemic responsibility. By placing the burden entirely on individuals, the narrative quietly absolves institutions, markets, and policy frameworks of accountability. If someone loses their job, the explanation becomes simple: they failed to adapt. They didn't learn fast enough. They didn't upgrade their skills. The system itself remains unquestioned. This is convenient for organizations, governments, and economic structures because it prevents uncomfortable scrutiny. There is no need to examine whether enough jobs exist, whether reskilling pipelines are realistic, or whether entire sectors are shrinking structurally. The focus stays on personal inadequacy rather than systemic transformation. In this way, the sentence functions as a moral shield. It converts a collective challenge into a series of private failures. Third, it offers hope without demanding structural change. Real hope is costly. It requires redesigning systems, rethinking education, rebuilding social safety nets, and confronting the possibility that work itself may need to be redefined. This sentence offers a cheaper alternative. It promises continuity without disruption. It suggests that the existing order will remain intact as long as individuals adapt. No uncomfortable conversations are required about job scarcity. No serious discussions are needed about economic contraction. No acknowledgement is necessary that entire professional categories may vanish. The sentence allows society to postpone these discussions indefinitely. This is why it is the perfect sentence for institutions. It maintains stability, delays reform, and keeps responsibility fragmented. It calms the public without committing to change. And this is precisely why it is the worst sentence for individuals. Because while institutions gain time, individuals lose it. They make decisions based on a narrative that minimizes structural risk. They prepare for competition in a system that may no longer be expanding. They blame themselves for outcomes that were never fully within their control. What feels like reassurance at a societal level becomes misdirection at a personal level. The mathematical reality the sentence ignores. Let us strip emotion away and look at numbers, because mathematics is indifferent to hope, intention, or motivation. It does not negotiate with narratives. It simply describes outcomes. If one person, equipped with effective AI systems, can do the work of 10 content writers, producing articles, reports, scripts, and marketing copy at scale, 20 analysts, processing data, generating insights, forecasting trends, and preparing presentations, 50 customer support agents, handling inquiries simultaneously without fatigue or delay, 100 junior developers, writing boilerplate code, debugging, documenting, and testing. Then the system does not need replacement. It needs reduction. This distinction is critical and is the first reality the popular myth carefully avoids. Replacement implies a one-to-one exchange. One human displaced, another human employed. Reduction implies something far more unsettling: fewer humans are required overall to generate equal or greater output. This is not a philosophical claim. It is an arithmetic one. When productivity multiplies without a corresponding increase in demand, labor participation must shrink. There is no alternative outcome within a market-based system. The economy does not absorb surplus labor out of goodwill, it absorbs only what is economically justified. This is why AI is not primarily a tool for the redistribution of work between humans. It does not merely shift advantage from one worker to another. It changes the total quantity of human labor needed. AI is a tool for compression of labor. It collapses what once required many people, many roles, and many layers of coordination into a smaller number of human touch points, often just oversight, validation, and exception handling. The center of gravity moves away from execution and toward control. Economic history has never seen this at scale before. Previous technological revolutions amplified human effort, but they still required large numbers of humans to operate, coordinate, and maintain the systems they introduced. Factories needed workers. Offices needed clerks. Computers needed operators. The internet needed creators. AI increasingly needs fewer humans per unit of output. That is the structural break this sentence ignores. It is not about who uses the tool better. It is about how many people the system can now function without. Why past comparisons are misleading. Supporters of this myth often point to history to calm present fears. History, after all, feels reassuring. It suggests that we have been here before, that disruption is painful but ultimately balanced, and that new opportunities always emerge to replace what is lost. They usually cite familiar examples. The Industrial Revolution created factory jobs. Computers created IT careers. The Internet created digital economies. On the surface, these comparisons sound reasonable. Each technological shift did eliminate certain roles, but it also generated entirely new industries. So why should AI be any different? This comparison fails for one critical reason. All previous revolutions increased the demand for human coordination. The Industrial Revolution mechanized physical labor, but it required vast numbers of people to operate machines, manage supply chains, supervise production, and maintain equipment. Factories did not replace humans, they reorganized them at scale. Computers automated calculation and record-keeping, but they created entire ecosystems of human roles. Programmers, system administrators, IT support staff, trainers, analysts, and managers became essential. Computers multiplied the need for human oversight and interaction rather than reducing it. The Internet expanded this pattern even further. Digital economies thrived precisely because they needed humans everywhere: content creators, moderators, designers, community managers, advertisers, product managers, and platform operators. The Internet amplified participation. AI breaks this historical pattern. AI does not increase the need for coordination. It reduces it. AI systems do not require teams to communicate, negotiate, and align. They do not need meetings, approvals, or layered management. Once trained and deployed, they execute tasks independently and consistently, with minimal human involvement. Where factories still needed workers, AI replaces the workers' cognitive output. Where computers still needed operators, AI replaces the operators' decisions. Where the Internet still needed creators and managers, AI increasingly generates, optimizes, and moderates content itself. This is the fundamental rupture. AI increasingly needs oversight, not participation. And oversight, by definition, does not scale linearly. One person can oversee many systems. Many systems do not need many overseers. You cannot have millions of overseers because oversight exists only when there is something left to oversee. As systems become more autonomous, even oversight begins to shrink. This is why historical comparisons fail. They assume expansion where AI creates contraction. They assume participation where AI enables removal. And they assume continuity where AI introduces a structural break unlike anything modern economies have experienced before. What the research actually shows. This conversation is no longer speculative. It is no longer driven by opinions, headlines, or isolated anecdotes. Multiple economic and labor studies now converge on the same conclusion, using different models, datasets, and assumptions, yet arriving at remarkably similar outcomes. Research from institutions such as the OECD, the World Economic Forum, leading universities, and independent economic think tanks consistently points in one direction. The disagreement is no longer whether AI will reshape employment, but how fast and how unevenly it will do so. Across studies, the same patterns repeat. First, AI-driven productivity gains consistently outpace job creation. Output per worker increases sharply, but the number of workers required does not rise proportionally. In many cases, it stagnates or declines. This breaks the historical relationship between productivity growth and employment growth that defined much of the 20th century. Second, new roles do emerge, but they appear in much smaller numbers than the roles displaced. AI creates specialized positions. System designers, model supervisors, AI strategists, but these roles are limited by design. They are not mass employment categories. They are high-leverage, low-volume roles that cannot absorb millions of displaced workers. Third, skill thresholds rise faster than reskilling pipelines. Research repeatedly shows that while new jobs demand advanced cognitive, technical, or hybrid skills, education and training systems struggle to keep pace. Reskilling takes years. AI-driven task automation advances in months. This creates a persistent gap between what workers can realistically acquire and what the market demands. Fourth, wage polarization increases. High-skill, high-leverage roles command premium compensation, while middle and lower-skill wages stagnate or decline. The labor market stretches rather than lifts. Income inequality widens not because top wages explode alone, but because the middle erodes. Fifth, middle-skill roles shrink first. These roles: analysts, coordinators, junior professionals, operational specialists, sit precisely where AI excels. They involve structured decision-making, pattern recognition, and repeatable judgment. Research consistently identifies this group as the most vulnerable, not the least skilled and not the most senior. One widely cited projection estimates that 30 to 40% of current work tasks can be automated by the early 2030s, depending on sector and geography. Crucially, this figure refers to tasks, not jobs. But jobs are simply collections of tasks. Once enough tasks are automated, the job dissolves naturally. At the same time, projections show that net job creation lags far behind task automation. New roles do not scale fast enough, broadly enough, or accessibly enough to compensate for what is lost. This is not panic. This is not pessimism. This is modeling, based on data, trends, and observed adoption curves. The discomfort comes not from exaggeration, but from consistency. Independent analyses, using different assumptions, keep pointing to the same structural outcome. And when multiple models agree, it is no longer wise to dismiss the signal as fear. The fallacy of, if you learn AI, you're safe. The myth implies a deceptively simple formula. Learn AI, stay relevant, keep your job. At first glance, this sequence feels logical. It mirrors how skills worked in earlier eras: learn the new tool, remain competitive, and continue participating in the workforce. It suggests a fair exchange, effort in, security out. But this logic rests on a set of assumptions that no longer hold true. First, it assumes that jobs remain structurally intact. In previous technological transitions, roles evolved but largely survived. The tools changed, the workflows shifted, but the job itself continued to exist. Today, that stability is gone. AI does not merely change how a job is done, it dismantles the job into its constituent parts. Once those parts are separated, the role itself loses coherence. Second, the formula assumes that demand scales with skill adoption. It presumes that as more people learn AI, the market will naturally create space for them. This was true when technology expanded industries and required more human coordination. But AI increases output without requiring proportional increases in human participation. Learning AI does not expand demand for humans, it often reduces it by increasing efficiency. Third, it assumes that everyone who adapts is absorbed. This is perhaps the most comforting assumption, and the most dangerous. It suggests that willingness and effort are enough, that the system has room for all who comply. In reality, AI-driven systems are designed to function with fewer people, not more. Adaptation improves your chances, but it does not change the size of the door you are trying to enter. When these assumptions collapse, a harsher reality emerges. In reality, roles are dissolving into tasks. Jobs are no longer treated as indivisible units. They are broken down into repeatable actions, decisions, and outputs. Once a task can be clearly defined, it becomes a candidate for automation. Those tasks are then automated selectively, not all at once. High-volume, high-repeatability tasks disappear first. Judgment-heavy tasks linger longer. Over time, enough tasks vanish that the job itself becomes unnecessary, or reduced to a thin oversight layer. As a result, fewer humans are needed even at higher skill levels. This is the most counterintuitive part. Advanced skills no longer guarantee safety, because AI is climbing the skill ladder rapidly. What was once considered senior expertise becomes encoded, systematized, and scaled. Learning AI still matters, but not in the way the myth suggests. It improves individual leverage. It increases speed, reach, and relevance relative to others. But it does not guarantee systemic inclusion. It does not ensure that there will be a place for everyone who adapts. The system may simply not require that many humans, regardless of skill. This is the hardest truth to accept. Because it forces a shift from personal narratives of merit to systemic realities of contraction. It asks people to confront not just how to learn, but where learning still leads to meaningful participation. And it dismantles the comforting belief that effort alone can protect against structural change. Why even AI-skilled professionals are at risk. Another uncomfortable reality must be confronted, because it directly contradicts one of the strongest assumptions in professional culture. AI does not stop at junior roles. Most people initially believe automation follows a simple hierarchy: junior work disappears first, senior work remains protected. This belief feels intuitive. Junior roles handle repetitive tasks, while senior roles rely on judgment, experience, and strategic thinking. But this logic breaks down once junior tasks are automated at scale. When AI takes over entry-level and mid-level execution, senior roles do not become more valuable. They become structurally unstable. Why? Because senior roles derive much of their leverage from the existence of a pipeline beneath them. First, training pipelines disappear. In traditional organizations, juniors perform foundational tasks while learning. Seniors guide, review, mentor, and gradually delegate. This creates a continuous flow of talent, knowledge transfer, and cost efficiency. When AI replaces junior execution, that pipeline collapses. There are fewer people to train, fewer people to mentor, and fewer reasons to maintain layered expertise. Without juniors, seniors are no longer multipliers of human capacity. They become isolated specialists overseeing systems rather than teams. Second, organizational depth collapses. AI-driven organizations flatten by design. Layers that once existed to manage people, coordinate work, and distribute responsibility are no longer necessary. Decision-making compresses upward. Execution collapses downward into systems. What remains is a thin layer of oversight at the top. In such structures, there is little room for large numbers of senior professionals. Depth becomes inefficiency. Experience becomes redundant unless it directly influences system-level outcomes. Third, experience becomes harder to monetize. Experience once commanded value because it reduced risk, improved decision quality, and guided teams through complexity. But when AI systems encode best practices, simulate scenarios, and optimize outcomes continuously, experience loses its scarcity. The market no longer asks, who has the most experience? It asks, who can deliver results with the least human cost? This is where the danger becomes explicit. A senior professional without a junior pipeline becomes expensive overhead. Their salary reflects years of accumulated value, but their operational leverage shrinks in AI-optimized environments. They are no longer amplifying teams, they are supervising systems that require minimal intervention. And expensive overhead is exactly what AI-driven optimization targets next. Not out of malice. Not out of disregard for expertise. But because systems designed for efficiency naturally eliminate costs that do not scale. This is why seniority alone is no longer protection. And why even AI-skilled professionals must confront a sobering truth: learning AI delays displacement, but it does not automatically secure long-term relevance unless it fundamentally changes where and how value is created. The myth hides a shrinking pyramid. Traditional careers followed a pyramid. Many juniors. Fewer seniors. Very few leaders. AI flattens this structure. Fewer juniors are needed. Even fewer seniors are required. Only a handful of decision-makers remain. This is not a skills issue. It is a structural contraction. No amount of motivation changes that geometry. Why the myth shifts blame onto individuals. One of the most insidious effects of this narrative is not economic, but moral. The sentence, "Someone using AI will take your job," appears neutral on the surface, but it quietly rewrites responsibility. It reframes a systemic transformation as an individual shortcoming. In doing so, it alters how society assigns blame, guilt, and accountability. If "someone using AI will take your job," then job loss stops being understood as the outcome of structural change. It becomes a personal failure. The individual did not learn fast enough. Did not adapt quickly enough. Did not choose the right tools. The loss is no longer contextual, it is moralized. This framing is devastating because it ignores scale. When millions face displacement simultaneously, the issue cannot logically be individual incompetence. Yet the narrative insists on precisely that conclusion. It suggests that anyone left behind simply lacked discipline, curiosity, or ambition. Structural contraction is rebranded as laziness. This is how structural displacement is reframed as personal inadequacy. The economic reality, that fewer humans are needed overall, is replaced by a psychological accusation: "You didn't try hard enough." This absolves systems, institutions, and markets from scrutiny. If everyone is responsible for their own survival, then no one is responsible for the outcome. Even more troubling, this narrative disguises economic violence as meritocracy. When opportunity shrinks but competition intensifies, winners appear deserving and losers appear deficient. The system presents itself as fair because it rewards adaptation, while quietly ignoring that the number of available seats has collapsed. This creates the illusion of justice in an environment defined by scarcity. Those who succeed are celebrated as proof the system works. Those who fail are invisible, or worse, blamed. The brutality of contraction is masked behind the language of choice. This moral inversion creates guilt instead of clarity. People internalize failure rather than analyze conditions. They experience shame rather than insight. They spend energy blaming themselves instead of understanding how the ground beneath them has shifted. Anxiety replaces agency, and isolation replaces collective awareness. And this is where the narrative becomes most dangerous. Systems thrive when they are not questioned. By individualizing failure, the myth prevents collective inquiry. There is no demand for redesign. No pressure for policy intervention. No serious discussion about how societies absorb large-scale displacement. The system continues unchallenged, while individuals quietly carry the emotional cost. This is why the myth persists. Not because it is accurate, but because it is useful, to those who benefit from silence. The energy asymmetry nobody talks about. Another missing dimension in this entire debate, perhaps the most ignored one, is human energy. Most discussions about AI focus on skills, tools, speed, and intelligence. Very few acknowledge the biological reality that underpins all human effort. Humans are not just cognitive systems, they are physical and psychological organisms with limits. And those limits matter profoundly in an era defined by acceleration. AI learns continuously. Humans learn episodically. An AI system does not wait for the right moment to improve. It trains, retrains, fine-tunes, and updates as long as data and compute are available. Learning is not an event for machines, it is a permanent state. Humans, by contrast, learn in bursts. They need time, focus, motivation, and stability to acquire new skills. Learning competes with work, family, health, and survival. AI improves without rest. Humans burn out. Machines do not experience fatigue. They do not lose motivation. They do not carry emotional weight from past failures or future anxieties. They do not require recovery after intense effort. Humans do. Cognitive overload, stress, and exhaustion are not signs of weakness, they are biological signals. Ignoring them does not remove them, it compounds them. AI updates weekly, sometimes daily. Humans need years. New models, tools, and capabilities emerge at a pace that outstrips human adaptation cycles. What feels cutting edge today becomes baseline within months. Humans, however, need repetition, application, and time to integrate knowledge meaningfully. Expertise is built slowly. Identity changes even more slowly. This creates a fundamental asymmetry that the myth refuses to acknowledge. The narrative assumes infinite human adaptability. That people can continuously reskill, continuously perform, and continuously compete at machine speed. This assumption is not optimistic. It is unrealistic. Biology disagrees. Human cognition evolved for endurance, not perpetual acceleration. The brain can adapt, but only within certain rhythms. When those rhythms are violated for too long, performance declines, judgment weakens, and mental health suffers. No amount of motivation overrides physiology. This asymmetry means that even the most disciplined, curious, and hardworking individuals face diminishing returns over time. The race is not just against other humans using AI, it is against systems that never slow down, never tire, and never need to recover. Ignoring this reality leads to a dangerous conclusion, that anyone who struggles to keep up has failed personally. In truth, they may simply be human. And any system that assumes humans must operate at machine pace is not designing for progress. It is designing for attrition. Why speed destroys fairness? Even if we assume a best-case scenario, perfect access to education, flawless retraining programs, unlimited motivation, and zero resistance, speed alone breaks the promise that adaptation will be fair. This is the part most optimistic narratives refuse to confront. The issue is not willingness. The issue is time. By the time you learn a tool, master a workflow, and apply it professionally, the benchmark has already moved. AI systems do not wait for human mastery to stabilize. While humans move through learning in stages, confusion, practice, competence, technology advances continuously. New versions replace old ones. Capabilities expand. Expectations shift. What was once advanced becomes baseline faster than humans can internalize it. This creates a moving target. Those who started earlier gain more than just knowledge. They gain compound advantage. Early adopters experiment while stakes are low. They make mistakes cheaply. They build intuition, confidence, and reputation over time. Their learning compounds because it happens alongside the technology's growth. By contrast, those who start later do not simply start behind, they start under pressure. They are expected to perform immediately. They are compared against mature standards. They are judged against optimized systems. They are not learning in an open field. They are learning on a narrowing runway. This is how speed quietly destroys fairness. The system does not wait until everyone has caught up. Markets reward those who move first, not those who move eventually. Organizations standardize around early tools and workflows, then raise expectations accordingly. Latecomers are not rejected for lack of effort, they are rejected for lack of timing. Over time, something even more unforgiving happens. Eventually, the system stops absorbing latecomers altogether. Not because learning stops, but because demand saturates. Once enough early adopters exist to oversee systems, manage outputs, and deliver results, there is no economic incentive to bring in more humans, no matter how skilled they are. At that point, relevance is no longer earned through effort. It is gated by entry timing. This is why speed matters more than talent in periods of acceleration. And why fairness, understood as equal opportunity to adapt, quietly collapses even when education is available. The system does not punish people for starting late. It simply no longer needs them. The global inequality multiplier. The myth also ignores geography, and this omission is not accidental, it is convenient. Global narratives often speak as if opportunity is evenly distributed, as if access to learning, tools, and jobs is uniform across borders. In reality, AI does not spread opportunity evenly. It concentrates it. AI jobs increasingly cluster in fewer cities, often already dominant economic hubs. Fewer countries, typically those with capital, infrastructure, and regulatory leverage. Fewer companies, usually large platforms and well-funded organizations. This concentration is not a temporary imbalance. It is a structural feature of how AI develops and scales. Training advanced AI systems requires massive compute resources, large datasets, and specialized expertise. These are not evenly available. They accumulate where capital, research institutions, and corporate power already exist. As a result, AI ecosystems reinforce existing centers of influence rather than democratizing them. Displacement, on the other hand, is global. Automation does not respect borders. A call center job automated in one country affects workers thousands of miles away. A content system trained in one market replaces writers across many. A coding assistant deployed by a multinational firm reduces demand for junior developers worldwide. The impact is distributed. The opportunity is concentrated. This asymmetry creates a multiplier effect on inequality. In previous industrial revolutions, production still needed proximity. Factories had to be built where workers lived. Offices had to be staffed locally. Even digital economies required broad participation to scale. That geographic friction acted as a natural equalizer. AI removes that friction. Once an AI system is built, it can serve the world instantly. One system replaces many local roles across regions, while the benefits flow back to a narrow set of owners, operators, and investors. This widens inequality at a scale unseen in previous revolutions. Countries with limited access to AI infrastructure face a double burden. They lose jobs to automation while lacking pathways to create or control the systems that replace them. Workers in these regions are asked to adapt, without access to the environments where adaptation is rewarded. Even within wealthy nations, the divide sharpens. Opportunity pools in a handful of cities. Those outside these hubs face rising barriers, relocation costs, credential inflation, network gaps. That adaptation alone cannot overcome. The myth fails here because it assumes a level playing field. But the field is not level. And it never was. AI amplifies existing inequalities by design, not by accident. It rewards scale, capital, and early control. Without acknowledging this, the narrative of individual adaptation becomes not just misleading, but unjust. Because when displacement is global and opportunity is local, effort alone is no longer a fair currency. The final layer. Automation of oversight itself. Perhaps the most uncomfortable truth of all. Even, someone using AI, is a temporary role. Oversight itself is being automated. Systems already monitor performance, flag anomalies, self-correct, optimize workflows. Human oversight is shrinking, not stabilizing. Which means the myth has an expiration date. So why is learning AI still essential? This is the moment where clarity must replace fear. After dismantling the myth, it would be easy to fall into resignation, to assume that if AI compresses labor and shrinks opportunity, then learning it is futile. That conclusion would be just as dangerous as blind optimism. Learning AI is still essential. But not for the reasons most narratives suggest. Learning AI is not a guarantee of safety. It does not promise lifelong employment. It does not immunize anyone against systemic contraction. Believing otherwise simply replaces one illusion with another. Learning AI is a positioning strategy. And positioning matters profoundly when systems are changing faster than individuals can react. Those who understand AI, truly understand it, not just use tools superficially, gain a different vantage point. They are not merely faster workers, they become earlier observers of change. They begin to see displacement before it becomes visible to others. Signals that look like noise to the uninitiated, workflow compression, role thinning, task elimination, stand out clearly to them. Because they see earlier, they can adapt directionally, not reactively. Reactive adaptation happens under pressure. It is rushed, defensive, and often poorly chosen. Directional adaptation happens with intent. It involves repositioning skills, roles, and decisions toward areas where human judgment, framing, and accountability still matter. It is the difference between chasing tools and understanding trajectories. Those who learn AI deeply also learn where leverage is shifting. They move away from execution, the part of work machines are rapidly absorbing, and toward roles that shape, guide, interpret, and constrain systems. They understand that value is migrating upward, toward problem definition, ethical judgment, integration, and strategic oversight. Learning AI helps them follow that migration rather than resist it. Those who do not learn AI experience the opposite pattern. They often discover change too late, when decisions have already been made and systems already deployed. What feels sudden to them has been visible for months or years to those paying attention. They find themselves competing in shrinking pools, roles where demand is declining but supply is increasing. Competition intensifies, wages compress, and expectations rise. Effort increases while returns diminish. And because they lack contextual understanding, they are forced to react under pressure. Learning becomes urgent rather than strategic. Choices are made out of fear rather than clarity. This is the least favorable environment for meaningful adaptation. Learning AI does not save everyone. It cannot override structural contraction or guarantee inclusion in a system designed to need fewer humans. But not learning it guarantees vulnerability. It guarantees delayed awareness. It guarantees reactive decision-making. It guarantees dependence on narratives rather than understanding. In an era where timing, positioning, and leverage matter more than effort alone, learning AI is not about winning the race. It is about knowing where the race is actually heading. The real question the myth avoids. The real question is not, will AI take my job? That question is obsolete. The real question is, where do humans still create irreplaceable value when intelligence becomes cheap, fast, and abundant? This question does not have comforting slogans as answers. It requires awareness, reorientation, strategic humility, and above all, honesty. Why this chapter is the core of this book. This book does not exist to scare you. It exists to remove illusion. Because illusion delays action. And delay, in this era, is the most expensive mistake a professional can make. AI will not take all jobs. But it will reduce participation brutally. Someone using AI may take your job. But fewer people will still have jobs to take. That is the truth this chapter exists to confront. And from this point onward, the book stops asking whether change is coming. It focuses on how to live intelligently inside it. End of Chapter 7. Chapter 8, From AI to AGI to ASI, The Acceleration Curve. Human beings are bad at imagining exponential change. Not because we lack intelligence, but because our intuition evolved in a world that moved slowly. Seasons changed gradually. Tools improved incrementally. Knowledge passed from one generation to the next at a human pace. Our brains are wired for linear progression, one step after another, cause followed by effect, effort followed by reward. The future shaped by artificial intelligence does not follow this rhythm. It follows an acceleration curve. And once that curve bends upward, intuition becomes a liability. For most people, AI still feels like a tool category, something impressive, even astonishing at times, but ultimately contained. It is seen as a sophisticated extension of existing software, faster, smarter, more capable, yet still operating within familiar boundaries. People place it mentally alongside spreadsheets, search engines, or automation tools, powerful aids, but aids nonetheless. It is perceived as something bounded. Useful, but limited. Capable, but not autonomous. This framing creates psychological comfort. If AI is just another tool, then humans remain firmly in control. Tools can be learned, mastered, and put aside. They do not challenge authority, they serve it. AI is also seen as powerful, but specific. People associate it with isolated functions, writing text, generating images, assisting with code, answering questions. Each capability is evaluated independently, rather than as part of a growing, interconnected system. This compartmentalization makes AI feel manageable. If each function is narrow, then the whole appears contained. And because each version arrives with limitations, errors, and visible flaws, people conclude that AI is advanced, but manageable. They focus on what it cannot do yet rather than what it is steadily learning to do next. They judge it as a static product instead of a moving trajectory. This perception, however, is already outdated. AI is not a stable category. It is not a finished invention. It is not a tool that will remain within its current boundaries. AI is not a destination. It is a phase. A transitional phase between human-led intelligence, where humans are the primary source of reasoning, creativity, and judgment, and machine-led intelligence, where systems increasingly generate, optimize, and act upon knowledge faster than humans can follow. This transition is subtle but profound. During transitional phases, old assumptions still appear valid even as their foundations erode. People mistake continuity of form for continuity of function. Work still exists. Jobs still exist. Decisions still appear human-made. But the locus of intelligence is already shifting underneath. That is why this distinction matters more than any single job, industry, or profession. Jobs can be retrained. Industries can be restructured. Professions can evolve. But a shift in who or what leads intelligence reshapes everything simultaneously: work, economics, power, education, and meaning itself. Treating AI as just another tool obscures the scale of the transition underway. It keeps people focused on mastering functions rather than understanding direction. The danger is not that people underestimate AI's current abilities. The danger is that they misunderstand its role. They prepare for a future where AI assists humans, while the world is moving toward one where humans increasingly adapt to systems that lead. To understand what is coming, we must separate three concepts that are often confused but fundamentally different: AI, AGI, and ASI. Artificial intelligence, as we know it today, is narrow. It excels at specific tasks. Writing, coding, analyzing, predicting, within defined boundaries. It does not understand the world the way humans do, but it simulates understanding well enough to be economically transformative. Artificial General Intelligence, or AGI, represents a system that can perform any intellectual task a human can. Not just one domain, but many. Not just execution, but transfer of learning. Reasoning across contexts. Solving novel problems without retraining. Artificial Superintelligence, or ASI, goes further still. It refers to intelligence that surpasses human capability across all domains: strategic, creative, scientific, emotional, and social. These are not science fiction labels. They are milestones. What makes this progression uniquely dangerous, and uniquely powerful, is speed. Not raw capability alone, not intelligence in isolation, but the velocity at which change is compounding. Speed transforms disruption from a challenge into a destabilizing force. Previous technological leaps unfolded across decades or centuries. The Industrial Revolution stretched across generations. Electricity took decades to rewire societies. Computers entered workplaces slowly. Even the Internet, despite feeling rapid in hindsight, allowed years for institutions, laws, education systems, and cultural norms to adapt. That time buffer mattered. Societies had space to debate. Institutions had time to restructure. Individuals had time to reskill. Mistakes were painful, but recoverable. Whole generations could adjust gradually, passing new norms to the next. That buffer no longer exists. The AI-AGI-ASI curve is not unfolding across centuries. It is unfolding within a single human lifetime, and possibly within a single career. This compresses adaptation into a window far smaller than our social systems were designed to handle. A person may begin their career in a world where AI assists. Midway through, they may compete with systems that generalize. By the later stages, they may operate in an environment where machine intelligence exceeds human capacity in most domains. No previous generation has faced this. Careers were once ladders. Now they are moving walkways. Standing still does not mean stability, it means falling behind. Learning once every few years is no longer sufficient when the underlying intelligence of systems changes annually, or faster. Institutions suffer even more. Education systems are built on multi-year cycles. Regulations take years to draft and approve. Cultural norms change through repetition and consensus. These processes assume a relatively stable technological baseline. The acceleration curve shatters that assumption. By the time institutions react, the terrain has already shifted. Policies address yesterday's capabilities. Curricula prepare students for tools that are already obsolete. Ethical frameworks trail behind real-world deployment. Speed turns foresight into a survival skill. The danger lies not just in what AI becomes, but in how quickly it becomes it. Power concentrates faster. Mistakes propagate faster. Inequality widens faster. And correction becomes harder, because systems entrench themselves before society fully understands them. This is also what makes the progression uniquely powerful. Speed amplifies advantage. Early movers compound learning. Early systems set standards. Early decisions harden into infrastructure. Once intelligence begins improving itself on compressed timelines, momentum replaces deliberation. In such an environment, waiting for certainty is no longer cautious, it is reckless. Because by the time certainty arrives, the curve has already moved on. One of the most misunderstood aspects of this transition is the assumption that each stage will arrive cleanly, with clear boundaries and public announcements. That is not how intelligence evolves. AGI will not arrive on a specific day. It will emerge. Capabilities will accumulate. Systems will generalize quietly. What feels like advanced AI 1 year will suddenly behave like general intelligence the next. And by the time society agrees that AGI has arrived, systems will already be operating beyond human supervision in many domains. This is how thresholds are crossed. Not with ceremony. With normalization. The same applies to ASI. Superintelligence will not announce itself as superior. It will simply outperform. Faster insights. Better strategies. Fewer errors. More optimal decisions. At first, humans will still be in the loop. Then they will be on the loop. Eventually, they will be out of the loop. Not because they were removed, but because their presence stopped adding value. This is where the acceleration curve becomes destabilizing. Human adaptation has limits. Institutions adapt even more slowly. Laws, education systems, cultural norms, and economic policies are reactive by design. They respond after patterns stabilize. But intelligence acceleration does not stabilize. It compounds. Each improvement enables the next. Each breakthrough shortens the time to the following one. Feedback loops tighten. Progress feeds itself. This is why comparisons to past revolutions fail so dramatically. There is no historical precedent for self-improving intelligence at scale. One of the most important insights to grasp is this. The largest disruptions will not come from AGI replacing humans directly. They will come from the anticipation of AGI. This distinction is subtle, but it is critical. History shows that systems do not wait for certainty before they change. They move on expectations. They move on probability. They move on perceived direction. And once a future feels plausible, especially economically plausible, behavior shifts immediately. Markets, in particular, do not price the present. They price the future. Investors do not wait for AGI to exist before reallocating capital. They move the moment AGI appears inevitable enough. Valuations rise or collapse based not on what systems can do today, but on what they are expected to do tomorrow. Entire sectors feel pressure years before displacement actually occurs. Organizations behave the same way. Companies do not wait until humans are fully replaceable to redesign workflows. They restructure in advance. They flatten hierarchies early. They slow hiring before automation is complete. They rewrite job descriptions, redefine expectations, and quietly remove redundancy based on what they believe will soon be possible. Governments, too, respond preemptively. They prepare defensively, not optimistically. They invest in AI capabilities for strategic advantage. They worry about labor instability before mass unemployment arrives. They debate regulation not because AGI exists, but because it might. National strategies shift based on anticipation, not arrival. Capital follows this logic relentlessly. Funding moves toward automation-heavy companies early. Human-intensive models begin to look risky. Long-term bets favor systems that reduce dependency on labor. Once capital shifts, outcomes follow, regardless of whether AGI has fully arrived. This is why even partial progress toward AGI triggers disproportionate change. You do not need full general intelligence to unsettle labor markets. You only need enough progress to make replacement credible. The moment organizations believe that a role will likely be automated in the near future, they stop investing in it. They stop training for it. They stop expanding it. The role begins to wither before it is technically obsolete. Jobs will be redesigned before AGI exists. Tasks will be removed before full automation is possible. Human involvement will be minimized before machines are perfect. Education follows the same anticipatory pattern. Curricula are questioned not when ASI emerges, but when current learning pathways start to look misaligned with future demand. Degrees lose perceived value before alternatives stabilize. Students and institutions alike begin to doubt whether traditional timelines make sense in a rapidly accelerating intelligence landscape. Power structures also shift early. Those who control emerging AI capabilities gain leverage long before those capabilities reach maturity. Influence accumulates ahead of impact. By the time the public recognizes the shift, authority has already consolidated around those who moved first. This is the true effect of acceleration. It does not just increase the speed of change. It compresses decision timelines. Decisions that once unfolded over decades are now made in years, or months. Strategic patience becomes a liability. Waiting for proof becomes riskier than acting on foresight. And this is why anticipation, not realization, is the real driver of disruption. By the time AGI fully arrives, much of the world will already have reorganized itself around the assumption that it was coming. Another overlooked consequence of the AI-AGI-ASI curve is epistemic displacement. For centuries, humans have been the ultimate reference point for knowledge. Even when tools assisted us, humans decided what was true, relevant, or meaningful. As AI systems begin to outperform humans in research, discovery, and reasoning, that authority erodes. When a machine consistently produces better predictions, better diagnoses, better strategies, and better explanations, human judgment becomes optional. Not wrong. Just unnecessary. This challenges something deeper than employment. It challenges human centrality. This is why resistance to AI so often feels emotional rather than logical, even when it is expressed through rational arguments. On the surface, people talk about accuracy, ethics, regulation, or reliability. Beneath those conversations lies something far deeper and far more unsettling. It is not just fear of job loss. Job loss is concrete, measurable, and familiar. Societies have endured it before. It can be discussed in terms of policies, retraining, compensation, and timelines. While painful, it is not existential. What people are reacting to now is something more profound. It is a fear of irrelevance at a civilizational level. For the first time in human history, intelligence itself, the trait that defined human superiority over every other species, is no longer exclusively human. This strikes at the core of identity, not employment. It challenges the unspoken assumption that humans will always be the primary thinkers, deciders, and sense-makers of the world. There is a growing fear that humans may no longer be the smartest entities in the room. Not eventually. Not hypothetically. But soon. When machines outperform humans in reasoning, pattern recognition, prediction, and even creativity, the hierarchy humans have always occupied begins to feel unstable. Expertise loses its authority. Experience loses its dominance. Confidence erodes, not because people are incapable, but because comparison itself becomes unfavorable. There is also fear that decision-making may shift beyond human comprehension. This fear is rarely articulated clearly, but it is deeply felt. As AI systems grow more complex, their internal reasoning becomes harder to interpret, even for their creators. Decisions may be statistically optimal yet intuitively opaque. Humans may still approve outcomes, but without fully understanding the process that produced them. That loss of comprehension is deeply unsettling. Humans have always accepted tools they could understand. A hammer, a machine, even a computer followed logic that could be traced. Intelligence that cannot be fully followed, explained, or questioned undermines a core sense of agency. And beneath all of this lies the most uncomfortable fear of all. The fear that meaning itself may need to be redefined. For centuries, meaning has been tied to contribution, work, mastery, and intellectual distinction. If machines can do most things better, faster, and at scale, then what does human contribution mean? What does purpose look like in a world where usefulness is no longer uniquely human? This is not a technical question. It is a philosophical one. And philosophical threats do not trigger calm debate. They trigger defensiveness, denial, and emotional resistance. These fears are rarely spoken openly because they sound abstract, dramatic, or uncomfortable. People feel safer arguing about tools than confronting identity. But these unspoken anxieties shape behavior everywhere. Hesitation, backlash, skepticism, overconfidence, dismissal, and even hostility toward AI. Resistance, then, is not ignorance. It is a deeply human response to a future that threatens not just livelihoods, but human centrality itself. Understanding this does not make the transition easier, but it makes it honest. Acceleration also reshapes power, and it does so more radically than any technological shift before it. This is not just a story about productivity or efficiency. It is a story about who holds influence in the world and why. Control over advanced AI systems concentrates power faster than any previous technology in human history. The reason lies in how fundamentally different AI is from earlier sources of power. Unlike natural resources, AI does not require physical extraction, transportation, or territorial control. Oil must be drilled. Minerals must be mined. Land must be defended. AI, once developed, can be deployed instantly, replicated endlessly, and accessed globally at near zero marginal cost. Unlike labor, AI does not fragment geographically. Human workforces are distributed across countries, cultures, and time zones. They require coordination, negotiation, and compromise. AI systems do not. A single system trained in one place can operate everywhere simultaneously. It does not negotiate wages, demand rights, or resist redeployment. Unlike capital, AI compounds cognitively. Capital grows through reinvestment, but intelligence grows through feedback. Every interaction, every decision, every outcome becomes new training data. The system does not merely accumulate wealth, it accumulates understanding. And understanding, once encoded, accelerates further understanding. This creates an unprecedented dynamic, power that improves itself. Those who control advanced AI systems are not just owners of tools. They are stewards of intelligence infrastructure, the machinery through which decisions, predictions, and optimizations flow. That control translates directly into leverage across every domain that matters. Economically, they influence markets, productivity, and value creation. Militarily, they shape strategy, surveillance, and autonomous capability. Politically, they influence governance, policy modeling, and public narratives. Culturally, they shape information flows, creativity, and meaning itself. Power no longer rests solely in money, land, or manpower. It rests in who controls cognition at scale. This is why the emerging inequality cannot be understood purely in terms of wealth. We are entering a world where inequality is defined by cognitive asymmetry. Some actors understand how systems work. Some control the systems themselves. Some decide how intelligence is applied, and to whom. The rest interact only with the outputs. This asymmetry is far more consequential than income gaps. Wealth can sometimes be redistributed. Knowledge can sometimes be taught. But control over intelligence infrastructure creates a separation that is harder to bridge. Those on one side shape reality, those on the other adapt to it. The most profound divide, then, is not between rich and poor. It is between those who understand what is happening, those who control the systems driving it, and those who must live with decisions they did not make and cannot fully question. Acceleration ensures that this divide widens quickly. Early advantage compounds. Late awareness costs more. And once power consolidates around intelligence, it becomes self-reinforcing. In such a world, the central question of the future is no longer just how wealth is distributed. It is who gets to think at scale, and who is expected to comply. For individuals, this acceleration curve creates a brutal paradox. The faster the future arrives, the less time people have to prepare. The less time they have to prepare, the more costly mistakes become. Waiting for clarity becomes dangerous because clarity arrives only after change is irreversible. This is why the question, when will AGI arrive, is the wrong one. The correct question is, what does acceleration demand from humans right now? The answer is not technical mastery, and this is one of the most counterintuitive truths of the AI era. Technical mastery feels safe. It feels concrete. It offers checklists, courses, certifications, and visible progress. It gives the comforting illusion that if you learn enough tools, you will eventually outrun disruption. But in an accelerating world, mastery of tools ages quickly. What you master today becomes standard tomorrow and obsolete soon after. What matters more than mastery is orientation. Orientation is the ability to understand where things are heading, not just how they work right now. It is the difference between memorizing maps and knowing which direction the terrain is shifting. In periods of slow change, detail matters more. In periods of rapid acceleration, direction matters more than detail. Orientation means understanding direction rather than detail. Details change constantly. Interfaces evolve. Tools get replaced. Models improve. Entire workflows disappear and reappear in new forms. Direction, however, moves more slowly and more predictably. Once you understand where intelligence, automation, and decision-making are migrating, you can afford to let go of specific implementations without losing relevance. It also means recognizing trajectories rather than tools. Tools are snapshots. Trajectories are motion. People who focus only on tools chase what already exists. People who understand trajectories anticipate what is about to matter. They do not ask, which tool should I learn? They ask, what category of human work is shrinking, and which is becoming more critical? This shift in questioning changes everything. Most importantly, orientation requires developing judgment about where human value persists, and where it does not. This is uncomfortable work. It forces honest assessment. It requires admitting that some skills, no matter how hard-earned, are losing value. It demands the courage to move away from execution-heavy roles towards sense-making, framing, ethics, accountability, and decision ownership, areas where machines struggle not because they lack capability, but because responsibility still rests with humans. In an accelerating world, those who focus only on skills will always be behind. They will always be reacting to what has already changed. Their learning will be urgent, rushed, and pressure-driven. Those who focus on sense-making, on understanding systems, incentives, and direction, retain agency longer. They see change earlier. They move before panic sets in. They choose where to invest effort instead of scattering it across every new development. Sense-making does not stop change. But it allows humans to move with it rather than be dragged by it. And in a world where intelligence is accelerating faster than intuition, that difference defines who remains relevant, not because they know the most, but because they understand what truly matters next. This chapter is not about predicting timelines, because timelines create a false sense of control. They suggest that if we can just estimate dates and milestones accurately enough, we can plan comfortably around them. But acceleration does not respect schedules, and intelligence does not evolve according to human calendars. This chapter is about accepting velocity. Velocity changes how reality must be approached. When change moves slowly, prediction is useful. When change accelerates, prediction becomes fragile and acceptance of motion becomes essential. The critical shift is not knowing when something will happen, but recognizing that it is happening faster than our systems are designed to absorb. Once you accept that intelligence itself is accelerating beyond human pace, many comforting illusions collapse. The first is the illusion that careers can be planned decades ahead. Traditional career planning assumes stable roles, predictable progression, and incremental skill upgrades. Acceleration destroys that assumption. Careers become adaptive journeys rather than ladders. Long-term plans turn into directional hypotheses, constantly revised as the landscape shifts. The second is the illusion that institutions will protect relevance. For generations, education systems, professional bodies, and organizations acted as buffers between individuals and disruption. Credentials carried lasting value. Titles implied security. Institutions moved slowly but provided stability. Acceleration removes that protection. Institutions now react rather than lead, and by the time they adjust, relevance has already moved elsewhere. The third is the illusion that waiting for consensus is safe. In slower eras, waiting for best practices, standards, or social agreement was prudent. It reduced risk. In an accelerating world, consensus arrives only after opportunity has consolidated. By the time everyone agrees something matters, the advantage of early movement has already disappeared. This is where acceleration becomes unforgiving. Acceleration makes indecision expensive. Not because choices become easier, but because delay compounds cost. Every moment spent waiting reduces optionality. Every postponed decision narrows future paths. In fast-moving systems, not choosing is still a choice, one that hands control to external forces. Accepting velocity does not mean panicking or rushing blindly. It means abandoning the expectation of stability. It means shifting from certainty-seeking to orientation-seeking. It means acting with imperfect information rather than waiting for clarity that will never arrive in time. This chapter asks you to let go of the need for precise timelines and instead develop comfort with motion. Because in an accelerating world, survival does not belong to those who predict best. It belongs to those who move deliberately while everything else speeds up. AI is not the end of work. But it may be the end of work as a default human activity. AGI is not the end of human intelligence. But it may be the end of humans as the primary cognitive authority. ASI is not the end of humanity. But it may be the end of humanity as the central decision-maker. These are not conclusions. They are signals. The purpose of this chapter is not to alarm. It is to reframe. Because once you understand the acceleration curve, the earlier chapters take on a different meaning. Job loss is no longer the core issue. Automation is no longer the full story. Even AI adoption becomes secondary. The real challenge is keeping orientation in a world that is speeding up beyond intuition. And that is what the final chapters of this book will address. End of Chapter 8. Chapter 9 Humans in the Loop, or Out of the Loop. After acceleration, fear is natural. After automation, anxiety is inevitable. After confronting AI, AGI, and the possibility of ASI, the mind searches for something solid. Something that does not disappear the moment a new system is deployed. This chapter is not about comfort. It is about clarity. Because while much of what humans once did is being absorbed by machines, not everything is disappearing. Some domains are shrinking. Some are dissolving. But a few remain stubbornly human, not because machines are incapable in theory, but because responsibility, meaning, and consequence still anchor them to us. Understanding this distinction is the difference between panic and orientation. The first mistake people make is assuming that whatever still belongs to humans must be whatever machines cannot do. This assumption feels intuitive. For centuries, human value was defined by scarcity of ability, strength, speed, memory, calculation, creativity. Whenever machines arrived, humans simply moved to tasks machines were incapable of performing. That framing no longer holds. It is the wrong framing for an era in which machines are not just tools, but learning systems. Modern AI is not limited in the same way previous technologies were. Given enough data, compute, and time, machines will simulate almost everything humans do: writing, designing, diagnosing, strategizing, composing, even empathic language. Basing human relevance on capability alone is therefore a losing strategy, because capability is precisely what machines are accelerating toward. Capability is not the boundary anymore. Responsibility is. This distinction is crucial and often misunderstood. Machines can generate outputs, but they do not bear the consequences of those outputs. They do not carry moral weight. They do not face social judgment. They do not answer for harm, failure, or unintended outcomes. When something goes wrong, society does not hold the algorithm accountable, it looks for a human. What still belongs to humans is therefore not defined by difficulty. Many things that are difficult today will become easy for machines tomorrow. Difficulty is temporary. It erodes with scale and optimization. What still belongs to humans is defined by accountability. Accountability means ownership of outcomes. It means standing behind decisions when trade-offs are painful and consequences irreversible. It means being answerable not just for what worked, but for what failed. It means absorbing blame, responsibility, and ethical judgment in a way machines cannot. This is why humans remain central wherever stakes are real. Courts may use AI for analysis, but judges are accountable. Hospitals may use AI for diagnosis, but doctors are responsible. Governments may use AI for policy modeling, but leaders answer for consequences. In every domain where harm, justice, trust, or legitimacy matter, accountability anchors human involvement. This is the quiet shift underway. As machines become capable of almost everything, human value migrates away from doing and toward owning. Away from execution and toward responsibility. Away from producing answers and toward standing behind them. Understanding this reframes the entire future of work and meaning. The question is no longer, what can machines not do? It is, what must humans remain accountable for? That is the boundary that will not disappear, even in a world of superintelligent systems. Consider decision-making. Consider decision-making, because this is where the distinction between intelligence and responsibility becomes unavoidable. Machines can recommend decisions. They can analyze vast datasets, identify patterns no human could perceive, and suggest actions that maximize efficiency or probability of success. They can optimize outcomes across thousands of variables simultaneously. They can simulate consequences, running millions of scenarios to predict likely results faster and more accurately than any human committee ever could. In terms of calculation, machines already outperform us. But decision-making is not only about calculation. When decisions carry moral, legal, or existential weight, something changes fundamentally. The moment a decision affects human lives, dignity, rights, safety, or long-term societal direction, responsibility does not dissolve into code. It concentrates. Someone must answer for outcomes. When an algorithm denies a loan unfairly, a human institution is questioned. When an AI-assisted medical decision causes harm, a human professional is held accountable. When an automated system escalates conflict, violates privacy, or causes loss, society does not interrogate the model, it interrogates the people who allowed it to operate. Optimization failures are not neutral events. They have victims. They have consequences. They create irreversible trade-offs. And in those moments, explanations are not enough. Accountability is demanded. Machines do not carry guilt. They do not face judgment. They do not stand before courts, communities, or history. They cannot be punished, forgiven, or morally evaluated in a meaningful sense. They execute logic, but they do not own outcomes. This is why the burden of decision-making, in its deepest sense, does not belong to machines. It belongs to humans. Humans decide what values matter when values conflict. Humans decide which risks are acceptable and which are not. Humans decide when efficiency must yield to fairness, safety, or compassion. Even in a world saturated with intelligent systems, societies still require humans to stand behind decisions, not because machines are incapable, but because responsibility cannot be delegated without eroding trust, legitimacy, and meaning. As intelligence becomes automated, decision-making does not disappear. It becomes heavier. Fewer humans may be involved, but those who are involved carry greater weight. They are no longer valued for speed or precision, but for judgment under uncertainty and ownership of consequence. This is the quiet truth of the AI era. Machines may help us decide, but they cannot decide for us, not in the ways that ultimately matter. This is why judgment remains a human domain. Not judgment as pattern recognition, but judgment as ownership of consequence. Choosing between competing values. Deciding when efficiency should be sacrificed for fairness. Determining what should be done, not just what can be done. These are not technical decisions. They are human ones. Another domain that still belongs to humans is problem framing, and its importance is often underestimated precisely because it happens before any visible computation begins. AI is extraordinarily good at solving defined problems. Give it a clear objective, a measurable target, and a set of constraints, and it will outperform humans with remarkable consistency. It can optimize routes, prices, predictions, diagnoses, and strategies at a scale no human mind can match. But AI struggles with a far more fundamental task: deciding which problems are worth solving in the first place. That decision precedes intelligence. And it shapes everything that follows. Before any optimization begins, someone must decide. What should we optimize? What should we ignore? What outcomes matter, and which ones are acceptable losses? These are not technical questions. They are value judgments. Optimization without framing is dangerous because it amplifies intent without questioning it. An AI system will faithfully pursue whatever objective it is given, even if that objective is short-sighted, misaligned, or harmful. The system does not pause to ask whether the goal itself makes sense. It assumes the goal is valid. This is why framing determines direction more than intelligence ever will. If you optimize for speed, you may sacrifice safety. If you optimize for efficiency, you may erase fairness. If you optimize for growth, you may destroy sustainability. The algorithm will not resist these trade-offs. It will execute them perfectly. Poorly framed problems produce perfectly optimized disasters. History is filled with examples, not of intelligence failing, but of goals being defined too narrowly. Systems that maximized productivity while degrading dignity. Models that optimized profit while externalizing harm. Technologies that solved the wrong problem exceptionally well. AI magnifies this risk. The more powerful the optimizer, the more dangerous the framing error. This is why humans remain responsible for choosing the questions. Only humans can decide what values should guide optimization. Only humans can weigh competing goods that cannot be reduced to numbers. Only humans can decide when not to optimize at all. Problem framing requires context, ethics, foresight, and moral imagination, qualities rooted in lived experience rather than computation. It demands an understanding of second-order consequences, social impact, and long-term meaning. As AI becomes more capable, the importance of framing does not diminish. It becomes the most critical human responsibility of all. Because when machines can solve almost any problem we give them, the future depends less on how well we solve problems, and far more on whether we choose the right ones to solve. Meaning is another frontier machines can approximate but not own. AI can generate stories, art, music, and language that appear meaningful. But meaning itself is not a pattern, it is a human experience. It arises from suffering, limitation, mortality, and shared context. Humans assign meaning not because they compute it, but because they live it. What matters? Why it matters? When it matters enough to act. These are not outputs. They are commitments. There is also trust. Trust is not efficiency. Trust is not accuracy. Trust is relational. People do not trust systems the way they trust humans. They may rely on them, use them, even prefer them, but trust implies moral expectation. It implies betrayal is possible. It implies intention. Only humans can be trusted in that sense. And wherever trust matters, medicine, leadership, justice, care, humans remain essential, even as systems assist. Another overlooked human domain is integration, and it is overlooked precisely because it is subtle, slow, and difficult to measure. AI systems excel in narrow domains. They are optimized to perform specific functions within clearly defined boundaries. Given a task, a dataset, and an objective, they operate with extraordinary precision. Their strength lies in focus. They do one thing exceptionally well, then another, but always within the limits of what they have been designed or trained to do. Humans, by contrast, integrate across domains. This integration is not a technical skill that can be isolated or benchmarked. It is a way of navigating reality itself. Humans constantly reconcile competing forces, incomplete information, emotional nuance, social consequences, and long-term implications, often simultaneously. Humans combine logic with empathy. They can reason analytically while remaining sensitive to how decisions affect real people. They can recognize that a solution may be correct on paper yet damaging in practice. Empathy tempers logic, preventing cold optimization from becoming cruelty. Humans combine strategy with ethics. They can pursue long-term goals while questioning whether those goals should be pursued at all. They can pause, reconsider, and redirect when success conflicts with values. Strategy alone seeks advantage, ethics ask at what cost. Humans combine data with context. They understand that numbers do not exist in a vacuum. Data may be accurate, yet misleading when stripped of history, culture, or situational nuance. Humans can sense when a pattern is statistically valid but socially dangerous, or when an exception matters more than the average. Humans combine power with restraint. They can choose not to exercise full capability simply because doing so would cause harm. This restraint is not inefficiency, it is wisdom. It reflects an understanding that not everything that can be done should be done. This kind of integration is not computational. It cannot be reduced to optimization functions or objective weights, because it is shaped by lived experience. It emerges from contradiction, when values clash. From reflection, when past decisions are revisited. From responsibility, when consequences must be owned. Machines optimize within boundaries. Humans decide where boundaries should exist. As systems grow more capable, this distinction becomes more important, not less. The danger is not that machines will fail to integrate, it is that they will integrate exactly what they are told to integrate, without questioning the frame itself. Humans remain essential not because they are faster or smarter, but because they are capable of holding opposing truths at once, and choosing restraint, balance, or redirection when optimization alone would lead society astray. In an age of accelerating intelligence, integration is not a soft skill. It is a civilizational one. Then there is accountability for failure. When systems fail, people look for humans, not explanations. Who approved this? Who allowed this? Who decided this was acceptable? No matter how advanced intelligence becomes, societies still demand human accountability. Responsibility does not scale away. It concentrates. This is why the future does not belong to those who execute best. Execution is increasingly cheap. The future belongs to those who frame problems, own consequences, interpret meaning, integrate systems, carry responsibility. These roles are fewer. They are heavier. And they cannot be automated without destabilizing society itself. This chapter is not claiming that humans will always be central to every process, system, or decision. That assumption belongs to an earlier era, one in which human participation was necessary simply because no alternative existed. As intelligence becomes automated and scalable, it is neither realistic nor honest to insist that humans will remain everywhere. That is not the argument being made. The argument is more precise, and more demanding. It is that where humans remain involved, their involvement will matter more than ever before. Human participation is shrinking in breadth, but increasing in weight. Many roles will disappear. Many tasks will be absorbed. Many decisions will be delegated. What remains will not be evenly distributed across society. It will be concentrated. There will be fewer roles. This is unavoidable in a world optimized for efficiency. Automation removes redundancy. Systems flatten. Layers collapse. Human involvement is reserved only for points of highest leverage. But those remaining roles will carry higher stakes. Decisions made by a smaller number of people will affect more systems, more lives, and more outcomes than ever before. Errors will scale. Successes will scale. Responsibility will no longer be diluted across large teams, it will rest heavily on individuals and small groups. And with higher stakes comes greater responsibility. Those who remain involved will not be valued for how much they can do, but for what they are willing to stand behind. They will be judged not by output alone, but by judgment, restraint, ethical clarity, and accountability under pressure. This is not comforting. It offers no promise of inclusion for everyone. It offers no guarantee of security through effort alone. It does not soften the reality of contraction. But it is orienting. It replaces illusion with clarity. It shifts focus from chasing disappearing roles to understanding where weight is accumulating. It helps people prepare not for volume of work, but for depth of consequence. In a world where machines handle most execution, being human will not mean being everywhere. It will mean being responsible where it matters most. If Chapter 8 was about accepting velocity, Chapter 9 is about choosing posture. You cannot outrun intelligence. You cannot outlearn acceleration. But you can choose where to stand. Not in execution. Not in repetition. Not in optimization alone. But in responsibility. That is where humans still belong. And that is where the final chapter will lead. End of Chapter 9. Chapter 10, Why I Want You to Learn AI. After everything you have read so far, this chapter may feel unnecessary. You already know AI is disruptive. You already understand acceleration. You already see that jobs, roles, and institutions are changing faster than human intuition can track. So why insist, again, on learning AI? Not because it will save you. Not because it guarantees relevance. Not because it protects your job. I want you to learn AI for a far more fundamental reason. I want you to learn AI because ignorance is no longer neutral, and this is a historically new condition. For most of human history, people could opt out of dominant technologies without being excluded from society. One could live a meaningful, stable life without understanding the inner workings of machines, markets, or complex systems. Skills were local. Value was visible. Cause and effect were direct. In earlier eras, you could choose craftsmanship, manual work, local trade, agriculture, or slow professions and still remain economically viable and socially integrated. Even during industrialization, those who resisted certain technologies were not automatically rendered invisible. The economy was broad enough, and coordination was human enough, to absorb a wide range of participation styles. That option is disappearing. Not because society has become less tolerant, but because intelligence itself is becoming infrastructure. AI is no longer a tool you encounter occasionally, it is the invisible layer through which decisions flow. It shapes who is seen, who is selected, who is approved, and who is excluded, often without human interaction at the point of impact. AI now influences hiring decisions through automated screening and ranking. It affects lending through algorithmic risk assessment. It shapes healthcare through diagnostic support and prioritization. It enters education through admissions, evaluation, and personalized pathways. It influences policing, surveillance, and risk prediction. It governs content visibility, reach, and narrative prominence. These systems do not ask for your participation to affect you. They operate regardless of consent. When intelligence becomes infrastructure, not understanding it does not make you independent. Independence once meant self-sufficiency. Today, independence without comprehension becomes vulnerability. You cannot opt out of systems that evaluate you automatically. You cannot negotiate with algorithms you do not understand. You cannot meaningfully challenge decisions if you cannot recognize how they were made. Ignorance in this context does not preserve freedom. It transfers power. Those who understand AI can question, interpret, and sometimes influence outcomes. Those who do not experience outcomes as arbitrary. What feels like neutrality is, in fact, asymmetry. One side sees the system. The other lives inside it blindly. This is the quiet shift that makes learning AI essential. Not to dominate technology, but to avoid being governed by it without awareness. In a world where intelligence shapes opportunity, understanding intelligence is no longer optional. It is the minimum requirement for agency. I want you to learn AI because those who do not understand systems are governed by them, and this has always been true, only now the systems are faster, quieter, and less visible. Throughout history, power has rarely belonged only to those who owned land, weapons, or money. It has also belonged to those who understood the systems that shaped outcomes: legal systems, financial systems, bureaucratic systems, technological systems. Those who did not understand them were not necessarily oppressed by force, they were guided, filtered, sorted, and constrained by rules they could not see. This book has repeatedly emphasized that power is shifting toward those who control intelligence infrastructure. But beneath control lies something even more fundamental: comprehension. Control is rare. Comprehension is not. Very few people will build large models. Even fewer will deploy global systems. But millions of people will live inside the consequences of those systems every day. You do not need to build models to be affected by them. You do not need to deploy systems to be evaluated by them. AI systems already assess resumes, rank profiles, flag risks, score credibility, prioritize visibility, and allocate attention. They decide which applications are reviewed, which content spreads, which voices are amplified, and which opportunities surface. If you do not understand how these systems reason, their decisions feel mysterious. If you do not understand how they optimize, their outcomes feel arbitrary. If you do not understand how they fail, their errors feel personal. In that state, people begin to interpret system behavior as fate. Why wasn't I selected? Why was I filtered out? Why did my reach disappear? Why did this decision happen to me? Without understanding, outcomes feel final and unquestionable. But systems are not fate. They are designed. They encode assumptions, priorities, trade-offs, and blind spots. They reflect the values, explicit or implicit, of those who built and deployed them. Learning AI is not about becoming deeply technical or turning everyone into an engineer. It is not about mastering algorithms or writing code. That framing misses the point. Learning AI is about literacy. It is about knowing what systems are optimizing for, what data they rely on, where bias enters, where uncertainty lives, where human judgment was removed, and where it still exists. This understanding restores agency. It allows people to question outcomes instead of internalizing them. It enables critique rather than resignation. It turns confusion into interpretation. Refusing to learn AI today is not neutrality. It is surrender of visibility. Learning AI is an act of awareness. An act of resistance to opacity. An insistence on seeing the machinery that increasingly shapes life chances. It is not about control. It is about refusing to be blind. I want you to learn AI because orientation requires proximity. You cannot understand where intelligence is moving by standing outside it. Reading headlines is not enough. Listening to opinions is not enough. You need direct exposure, hands-on interaction, experimentation, and familiarity. Only proximity reveals what AI is good at, what it struggles with, where it replaces humans, where it amplifies humans, where it quietly reshapes expectations. Without that proximity, people misjudge timing, risk, and opportunity. They prepare for the wrong future. Learning AI shortens the distance between perception and reality. I want you to learn AI because delay compounds disadvantage. This book has shown repeatedly that acceleration punishes hesitation. Early understanding compounds. Late awareness compresses options. This does not mean everyone must rush blindly, but it does mean waiting for certainty is no longer safe. Learning AI today gives you earlier signal detection, longer decision windows, greater strategic flexibility, You may still face displacement. You may still face contraction. But you will face it with awareness, not shock. I want you to learn AI because human agency now depends on interpretation, not execution, and this marks a profound shift in how value is created and recognized. For most of modern history, agency was tied to doing. Those who could execute well, produce, build, analyze, calculate, deliver, were indispensable. Skill, effort, and reliability translated directly into economic and social value. The faster and more accurately you executed, the more leverage you had. That equation is breaking. Execution is becoming cheap. Tasks that once required years of training can now be performed instantly by systems that do not tire, negotiate, or slow down. What once differentiated professionals is increasingly automated, standardized, and scaled. Optimization is becoming automatic. Systems continuously improve themselves, refining outputs without human intervention. They test, compare, adjust, and converge toward efficiency faster than any individual or team ever could. Output is becoming abundant. Text, code, designs, analyses, recommendations, what was once scarce is now everywhere. When output is abundant, it stops being valuable on its own. Volume loses meaning when machines can generate it endlessly. In this environment, what remains scarce is interpretation. Someone must make sense of what systems produce. Someone must decide which outputs matter, which are misleading, and which are dangerous. Someone must translate results into action, weigh trade-offs, and absorb responsibility when decisions based on those outputs affect real people. Interpretation is not passive. It is an active, human process. It involves judgment, deciding when to trust systems and when to challenge them. It involves framing, deciding how outputs fit into broader goals, values, and constraints. It involves integration, combining system insights with human context, ethics, and lived experience. It involves accountability, standing behind decisions that no system can own. Learning AI shifts you away from being evaluated solely on how much you can produce and toward being valued for how well you can decide. Instead of competing with machines on speed or volume, you move closer to where responsibility accumulates. You position yourself near the points where outcomes are chosen, consequences are owned, and trade-offs are navigated. This is a crucial repositioning. Those who remain focused on execution will find themselves competing with systems that never stop improving. Those who develop interpretive capacity retain agency longer, because interpretation cannot be delegated without destabilizing trust. Learning AI, then, is not about doing more. It is about understanding more, and choosing wisely in a world where doing has become effortless. In an age of abundant output, agency belongs to those who can decide what to do with it. I want you to learn AI because meaning will need reconstruction. As machines absorb more work, societies will struggle with purpose. Many people will experience not just economic displacement, but existential disorientation. When usefulness is automated, meaning cannot rely on productivity alone. Learning AI does not answer the meaning question, but it places you inside the conversation rather than outside it. It allows you to participate in redefining contribution instead of reacting to definitions imposed by others. I want you to learn AI because resistance without understanding is surrender. Refusing to engage with AI does not slow it down. It only removes your influence. History is clear on this: those who reject foundational technologies rarely preserve autonomy. They lose leverage first, then voice, then choice. Learning AI does not mean accepting every outcome. It means earning the right to question intelligently. Let me be very clear about one thing. Learning AI does not mean becoming a programmer, chasing every tool, competing with machines, trying to be faster than systems. That is a misunderstanding. Learning AI means understanding trajectories, recognizing where value is moving, seeing displacement before it arrives, Positioning yourself near responsibility. Developing judgment under acceleration. It is not about mastery. It is about orientation. This book has painted a grim picture deliberately, and that choice was not accidental or sensational. It was necessary. Not to scare you. Not to overwhelm you. Not to paralyze you with fear. But to remove illusion. Illusion is comforting. It tells us that change will be slow, that systems will adapt in time, that institutions will protect us, that effort alone will be enough. Illusion softens reality just enough to make inaction feel reasonable. And that is precisely why it is dangerous. Illusion delays preparation. When people believe the future will resemble the past, they postpone hard decisions. They wait for clarity. They assume there will be warnings, transitions, and safety nets. They trust that disruption will arrive gradually and politely. By the time illusion breaks, options have already narrowed. Acceleration does not allow for that luxury. In an accelerating world, delay is not neutral. It compounds risk. Every year spent believing a comforting story is a year not spent repositioning, rethinking, or reorienting. Illusion does not protect people from change, it ensures they meet it unprepared. This is why removing illusion is not pessimism. It is responsibility. Preparation is the only ethical response to acceleration. Ethical, not because it guarantees success, but because it respects reality. Preparation acknowledges that systems are moving faster than intuition, that consequences will be uneven, and that pretending otherwise helps no one. It allows individuals to act with awareness rather than shock, with agency rather than regret. Preparation does not mean panic. It does not mean abandoning hope. It does not mean predicting every outcome correctly. It means accepting motion and responding deliberately. This book does not offer certainty. It offers clarity. And clarity, even when uncomfortable, is kinder than reassurance that proves false. In times of rapid change, truth is not cruelty. False comfort is. By confronting what is coming honestly, this book invites you to prepare, not because the future is guaranteed to be harsh, but because facing acceleration without illusion is the only way to meet it with dignity, agency, and choice. I want you to learn AI because the future will not ask whether you are ready. It will simply arrive. And when it does, there will be two kinds of people. Those who experience change as something that happened to them. And those who experience change as something they understood early enough to respond to. This book cannot guarantee safety. No book can. But it can offer something more valuable. Clarity in a time of noise. Orientation in a time of speed. Agency in a time of compression. That is why I want you to learn AI. Not to win. Not to dominate. But to remain awake in a world where intelligence is no longer exclusively human.